7-5.
Boom, baby!
The Fan.
Is in the hands of the coach's son.
How about that? Is that appropriate?
Oh, don't you know, just someday he'll be a coach of his own program. This is becoming a family dynasty, if you will.
And Dutch, what a year he's had, too. Hurley and the Huskies have their dreams come true.
So that was Jim Nantz last night. Kevin, you were or were not awake for that?
I was. I fought the eyelids a little bit around the 10, 11-minute mark, I would say, the second half. But you know what? Credit to San Diego State. They did make one, I think, final push, and they cut it to 5 with 5 to go. And then as UConn has done all throughout this tournament, answered every single call. Jake, it's one of the more dominant, impressive NCAA tournaments you'll ever see from a single team. Absolutely clinical, at least 13 points in every single victory. And yeah, just their final surge last night. I know probably a lot of our listening audience fell asleep. Basically, San Diego State cut it to 5 with 5 to go. I thought it was the loudest NRG Stadium had been since J.J. Watt sacked, insert AFC South quarterback here. And Jordan Hawkins comes down and hits a 3, and that started a 9-0 run, which UConn put the game on ice. And as you heard right there, Dan Hurley's son dribbling the clock out. Pretty cool moment for a guy that, I'm sure has had some probably battles in his life of, I'm in my brother's shadow, this and that. And now he gets to put the cherry on top of a true blue blood in college basketball.
By the way, Mark, everything going okay over there?
Yeah.
Sounded like you were building a house or something. What was
I wish. This early in the morning?
Knocking stuff around?
Oh, that's because, adapters don't work and all that stuff. That's okay.
That's okay. Couple of things about, and by the way, good morning. It is a Tuesday morning, really nice morning outside.
You don't need the jacket today.
No, it's great. It was 60 degrees, felt great walking outside. Two things that jump out at me about the NCAA tournament every year. Number one, it is always, to me, it's such a special time because it reminds me of childhood, of like spring break, time, and kind of turning the corner after that long slog after holiday break and the winter semester and everything. And
this weather helps.
Totally. And the tournament always kind of introduces that. But the other thing about the tournament that always gets fascinating to me is when the tournament is complete, and this is such a credit to a tournament champion, and in this case, Connecticut. You realize how tough it is and how much goes on in the tournament to win the tournament. And I know there are people that are like, is this really a national champion because there were better teams out there and it's single elimination? Well, yeah. I mean, they had to go through the same landmines as everybody else. But my point is this. Each NCAA tournament, each year, each installment of a tournament has like a team that comes out of nowhere and Florida Atlantic this year, or a storyline or whatever else. And then you look at the completed bracket when it's all said and done, and you realize, oh yeah, that moment where that team had their 15 minutes and they were the toast of college basketball. They had their moment in the sun, and that sunbeam was very fleeting and went on elsewhere. And there are so many moments in a tournament that you look at and you go, that seems like 2 years ago. For example, I'm looking at this bracket right here, okay? Arkansas over Kansas. Remember what a big deal that was?
Yeah. You're kind of lost in the shuffle of a Saturday night game. If you had plans that Saturday night, you probably missed it.
Furman over Virginia that you mentioned yesterday is a really good one.
I kind of forget Princeton, Jake.
Princeton over Missouri, yeah. I mean,
Princeton over Arizona.
Yeah.
Team that I had winning it all. Yeah.
3 years from now, let alone 10, is anybody going to remember that Kansas State beat Michigan State to advance to the Elite Eight?
I was thinking about that, and you know what? The individual player I might remember the most from this tournament is Marquise Noel for Kansas State.
Yeah.
And just the theater, the flair, the New York City style that he played with, that might be the individual I miss most.
The Gonzaga-UCLA game that was like wildly entertaining.
Another late game.
3 years ago, right? But a good tournament nonetheless. Also, and I was thinking about this And I get and I understand that people think, Kevin, that I say this stuff to like rub salt in the wound of Indiana. It's not that. It's just simply a perspective. I remember vividly in 1987, I was in the 8th grade, leaving for spring break and saying to Jason Keller, like, do you think they can get it done? Like, do you really think they can beat UNLV? My world was so dependent upon IU basketball and them trying to get their 5th national championship, which they did, obviously. And for Indiana, it was not only their 5th national title, it was their 3rd in 11 years. And then, of course, 5 years later, I'm a freshman in college, and they're in the Final Four again. And it's like, okay, well, this is just what happens every 4 or 5 years. And I was so proud always of the fact that Indiana had 5 titles, which was behind only UCLA and Kentucky, who at the time had 6. And ahead of Louisville, ahead of North Carolina, ahead of Kansas. I mean, who'd ever heard of Duke or Connecticut as national players? Since, Kevin, Indiana won their 5th national title. And I only say that because if you talk to Indiana fans, 5 banners, 5 banners, 5 banners. It's mentioned all the time. 5 banners, 5 banners. Since they won their 5th banner, not one, but 2 different programs have won 5 titles each, Duke and Connecticut. Kentucky has won 3 since then. Louisville has won 2 since then. Carolina has won 3 since then. Kansas has won 2 since then. And UCLA's won 1 since then.
Yeah, I've been born and I have gray hair and my hair's falling out since IU last won a title. To add maybe a little bit more context to it.
But you were born after that, right?
Correct, yeah. 2 years after Keith Smart hit the shot. I think the thing that stands out to me the most about UConn, Jake, is the 3 coaches in the last 12 years. 3 coaches to win a national title in the last 12 years. And again, I said this yesterday, none of them left the cupboard completely stocked for the next coach to just walk in and say, here we go, 30-win season, my first year. Like Kevin Ollie had to build it a little bit. Danny Hurley had to build it a little bit. And you go back to Jim Calhoun and obviously what UConn did in beating Butler in 2011. And you watched them last night, and they build that early lead, and San Diego State misses whatever it was, 13 in a row, 14 in a row. Jake, they just have no liabilities on the floor. They move the ball so well. There's just like a crisp nature to everyone out there. I don't know. Maybe Jordan Hawkins is their only first-round pick. I think that dude, I don't know if it's his baby face. I don't know if his jump shot. The 3 he hit to really put the game on ice, it's got a little Reggie Miller flair to it. Obviously a real slender kid. I'm very eager to watch him at the next level. But that is a team that is just so skilled and so talented. And they brought that other big kid in, Klingon, last name. Jake, he'd be the best big man on 98% of college basketball teams.
Yeah.
And Sonogo, the most outstanding player for the Final Four, is really skilled. It's darn impressive what Danny Hurley's built, and I see he's got a loaded recruiting class coming in next year.
Congratulations, by the way, to Paul. Paul is the winner of our numbers game.
Let's go, Paul.
Paul is on his way to Jay's Lobster and Fish Market in the Garage Food Hall in the Bottle Works District, one of Indianapolis Monthly's best restaurants of 2021 with lobster rolls, crab and shrimp rolls, Seafood Shack bringing a taste of East Coast to Indiana. And Paul is going to be able to try that. As a matter of fact, Tom, don't fret, Tom, you won the runner-up prize. So, Paul, you get a $100 gift card. Tom will be dining with a $50 gift card. Scotty gets the biggest margin of victory, blowout loser. He had UNC Asheville. That gets him in. And Raphael gets Princeton as the double-digit seed the furthest. So thank you to all who participated and called in to get a number. And thank you, of course, to Jay's Lobster and Fish Market in the Garage Hall. Please try them out and support those that support this program. Kevin, I thought...
and the final one to Trevor, right? For our bracket challenge?
That is correct. Trevor, the winner in the bracket challenge.
Trevor, the winner. Did we do a 6-pack on that? Us 3? Because I think you guys might be owing me.
Wait, what was this now?
Our bracket challenge. Mm-hmm. A little family.
I don't think we
6-pack bag. Did we do not?
I don't recall that.
I can't keep track of the number of PBR 6-packs we have.
How hammered do you want to get, Kevin?
Well, I the PBR is gone. Masters this weekend. I could use another.
Maybe I'll just bring you some in.
26th place for myself, 114 for Mark. Jake, were you Query in the bracket pool?
I think, yeah.
248.
Not Query is booty. You weren't that one?
I did see Query's booty.
I had My Final Four was Kansas, like maybe Texas. I had Texas in. I think I had Alabama and Marquette, maybe.
Trevor had UConn winning it all. He also had FAU.
Wow.
That's impressive.
Darn
That's
impressive.
Darn impressive.
So yeah, Trevor, are they just messaging us, Jake? How should they go about getting these?
Paul's on the YouTube chat. He says he'll call in a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say. We'll put the shout-outs a number of times here over the course of the morning to remind everybody to call in and get their information and Mark. Let me ask you this, Kevin, to put in perspective what you were saying about Connecticut with 3 different coaches. It is impressive. And it puts Connecticut into obviously an elite level in college basketball where they already were. But here's something interesting. I'm going to throw something out. I want either one of you guys to answer, okay? Tell me the home arena of the following teams. Kansas.
Allen Fieldhouse?
Yes. The University of Kentucky.
Rupp?
Mm-hmm.
Indiana.
Assembly Hall?
UCLA.
Pauley?
Louisville.
Boy, Freedom Hall was fun with Luke Herringgold and company, but they have
The Yum
upgraded
Center,
to the
right?
Yum Center.
The Yum Center, that's correct. 2 more here. Duke.
Cameron?
Connecticut.
Gamble Pavilion, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that what it's called? The only reason I mentioned it is because I was half expecting you to be like, you know what? I'm not even positive on that.
Pretty sure it's that. I could be wrong.
Kevin with the win. Harry Gamble Pavilion.
I mean,
I certainly get where you're going with that, Jake. I mean,
it's fascinating, isn't it?
I thought about this on the drive-in. If you compare it to college football a bit, like Notre Dame is a stronger TV draw than virtually everybody in college football. But you would not consider Notre Dame one of the top 6-7 college football programs over the last 25 years.
Right.
I feel that way about UConn and football, or UConn and basketball. You would have Indiana on TV in college basketball before you'd have
Correct.
UConn on TV. But
Like you don't see people in an airport wearing UConn hats.
they just quietly go about their
Right.
business, and part of it is probably where they are at in terms of the country. You almost forget, like, they were in the American just a few years ago, American Athletic Conference. And then they went back to the old Big East, and because they weren't originally in that Big East
Correct.
when it shifted here, a handful of years ago.
Are they the only public institution in the Big East? I think they are, right?
It's a good question. Yeah, I
think the rest are all either private Catholic or Jesuit schools.
that sounds right. DePaul?
That's a Catholic or either Jesuit or Catholic school
yeah.
in Chicago.
So yeah, it's to me what they've built, what they continue to sustain, just from an ability to, again, go from a Calhoun to an Ollie to a Hurley. You just don't see that. You don't see that at all. And if you look at their roster, who they could lose, again, Jordan Hawkins, probably a first-round pick, probably maybe even a lottery pick. Outside of that, I don't think it's a slam dunk they lose really anybody. And they're bringing in a 5-star freshman, and they're bringing in a couple more top 100 kids. You got to think they will be right up there. I know the odds came out for 2024. Purdue, of course, is up there. I think Kentucky might be the favorite. I know Calipari's got a pretty loaded class coming in next year, but absolutely surgical. And again, for those that missed it, San Diego State, horrific in the first half. They missed 14 in a row. They cut it to 12 at half, and then they did make a run. I think on a couple of occasions they got it to 2 possessions in the second half. They got it to 5 with 5 minutes to go, and that was when Jordan Hawkins hit just a huge 3, a really difficult shot coming off a screen. And UConn went on a 9-0 run after that, and the final couple minutes were pretty anticlimactic.
Now, did you do anything fun yesterday over the course of the day?
What did I do yesterday? No, not really. We definitely got outside, threw some burgers on the grill. Rosie always loves a little grill action. Put some fertilizer down on the lawn. It was a great day to do a little bit of the spring outdoor activities. Picked up sticks in the yard. A lot of housekeeping, I guess, on a Monday. How about you guys? Well, I'm gonna guess that you got some nice REM sleeping.
I hate to say this, I slept the entire day. Literally slept the entire day, which probably...
Now, what does that do for you at night?
I slept the entire night.
Like a bear in hibernation.
Literally.
Totally.
Mark, do you do anything? Girls get outside?
Well, Addie's back at kindergarten. It's first day back after spring break, so then we brought the other two to the park for a little bit to kill some time. That was fun. Girls like that and stuff, but yeah, not too much. Just a bunch of housework and all that stuff. Paul has called in, by the way, our winner.
Oh.
You want to talk to him real quick?
Sure.
Paul, congrats, man.
Good morning, fellas. How you doing?
Paul, great work.
Well, great work. All I did was pick number 20.
Hey, no one else picked 20.
Hey.
What was the reason for number 20?
Because it was when you guys posted on when you guys said, okay, I'm going to tell you guys the numbers, and the first one's on YouTube to send it in, I will get it. So everybody sent in a number, but they didn't pick 20. So the next day when I called, 20 was still available. So I picked 20.
Look at
So,
that.
Paul, here's the point of the game, okay? The reason that I've always enjoyed the numbers game and the whole origin of it is it simply gives you somebody to root for in the tournament and just gives you – now, it's not like you're going to go out and buying a T-shirt and painting your face, but during the course of it, it gave you a little bit of motivation.
you don't know how Paul watched the game last night.
That's
Maybe
right.
he had a big UC on the chest.
Did you at least have fun kind of pulling for UConn as the tournament went along?
I couldn't watch it. I had the game cast because I'm over here in the UK.
Oh, wow.
Wait a minute. You live in the – now –
I remember
No,
Paul
no,
telling us this.
I live in Indy. My kids are here in the UK.
that's right. And how long are you over there?
I leave tomorrow morning.
And how long have you been there?
Just a little over a week.
First time you've been to UK?
No.
So, Paul, you're up at 3 a.m. UK time, 2 a.m., watching the game on the Gamecast?
Yeah, well, we were out late bowling last night at 10 pin, so we were out late. We didn't get back until about 2 a.m.
Now, are you in London, or what part of England are you right now?
Any turkeys?
No, we're in Tipton right now.
Oh, you ought to go to the pork festival.
The Elston family's pretty famous in Tipton.
Now, what is the biggest difference in the British culture and here that you have noticed, Paul, either from your kids living there or from your times over there?
Well, first of all, they don't have Miracle Whip. They don't have French dressing. They don't have ranch dressing.
So they're smart.
Yeah, and my girls were mad at me because I didn't bring enough American snacks because their snacks and candy here taste a little different than what we have in America. But all in all, I mean, it's just like America. The people are friendly. And once they learn you from America, they like for you to continue to talk because they like our accent, whereas we like their accent.
Right. Totally, yeah.
That's awesome. Good
Yeah,
for
that is
you,
cool.
Paul. Well, the mail route will be waiting for you when you get back home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I love it. Paul, congrats on UConn, man, and safe travels.
Thank you, fellas.
All right, travel safe, Paul. That just tickles me pink that Paul was the winner because he's one of my favorite callers.
Yeah, and I remember when he called, back, I guess it would have been last year,
Wait a
about
minute,
going to London.
Did he just call from England? Like, how much was that phone call?
I know. It reminds me of the collect call stories of when I tried to get Stephen Esbin to come to the pool, and his dad was not very happy about me back in the day. We got a lot to get to on today's show. Obviously, we'll recap national title for those that fell asleep last night. The final was 75-59. I know a lot of people probably wake up and just assume UConn was on full cruise control. A couple of game pressure moments for them, but they easily cover that 7.5-point spread. We're going to have Will Haskett join us at 8 o'clock. Obviously, Will joins us pretty much every time we've got a major championship in golf. The Masters is this week. Jim Nantz now done. No more Final Fours. I'm actually pretty happy, to be honest with you, that Ian Eagle slides into that chair. I think Ian Eagle's a great play-by-play man. But Jim Nantz will head to Augusta, so we'll get Will Haskett's thoughts, some Masters picks on that. And then, Jake, you've dipped into the Baltimore Rolodex here coming up at 8:30.
So Nestor Aparicio is like I'm trying to think of I don't even know necessarily that we have this in Indy. The radio personality that's like uber out front, just larger than life persona type. He's worked for a number of radio stations in Baltimore. He's a Baltimore lifer, but covers the Ravens and has now his own web page where he covers specifically Baltimore sports and has covered a lot of Lamar Jackson and what he thinks Baltimore is going to do with Lamar Jackson. And I think he's still mad at Bob Irsay.
Oh, yeah. I went on with him once in Baltimore, and all he wanted to do was talk about the Mayflower. And he was irate about Bob Irsay.
He came to the Super Bowl in 2012, and he brought a Bob Irsay doll, a little Bob Irsay doll. And he had it.
We might need to Zoom with him today to get him on video.
He is a character. We shall say that. Right?
I actually went on another Baltimore radio show yesterday, and I thought they made an interesting point about Lamar. And I'm glad that we're kind of getting it from a Ravens perspective. You know, sometimes in our own little bubble, we don't think about from the other side of it, you know, how they view this situation. And I said to Nate Atkins when we had him on yesterday, Jake, I don't see the Colts seriously entertaining Lamar Jackson until the demands wildly change. Like, they would have to change significantly, I think, for the Colts to enter the mix at a realistic level. And I said that yesterday as a guest. And you remember the name Vinny Serrato, former NFL GM?
Yes.
He was one of the hosts yesterday. And I believe a big recruiting guy for Lou Holtz back in the day at Notre Dame. But Serrato quickly mentioned, like, well, if the demands change, the Ravens are just going to match. Like, right now, Lamar is going in there with the loftiest standards ever in terms of his expectations on what the market could be. Clearly, it doesn't seem like the market believes that Lamar Jackson deserves that. So if and when he starts to change his demands, then Baltimore, and their words continue to say this from John Harbaugh last week at the owners' meetings, and I think their actions say it as well, they are leaving plenty of room to make sure that they can match whatever offer sheet is out there, bring Lamar Jackson back. So, again, the more I kind of hear it from the Baltimore side as well, I assume Lamar Jackson will be back with the Ravens.
That's kind of been my assumption, but
and there's no real deadline, to be honest with you. There's nothing too imminent from that standpoint. I know, always the phrase of deadline spur action, but we'll enjoy that conversation. I did see reported yesterday the Colts out in Southern California for C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. They will then head to Lexington later this week to work out Will Levis. And I think, Jake, by the end of the week, you want to have these questions answered. Are we content? Should we trade up to 3? Should we trade back? Do we wait until draft night? I think the process of seeing these guys in person, taking your brain trust to them, getting the one-on-one time, spending pretty much a whole day, potentially, having dinner with these guys at night, you need to find answers to those questions.
And I don't know. I mean, we're not going to know. We're not going to have any indication for sure who it's going to be unless, unless the 3 teams in front of them all have like arranged contractual agreements with, every once in a while you see that, right? Like there's a chance we'll know who number 1's going to be. So it's not going to happen is what I'm saying. In other words, we're probably going to be taking a 50-50 shot up until the point that they make an announcement of who they're picking. And I think it's going to be Will Levis.
I'm not a big TV ratings person. Do you guys see that LSU Iowa TV rating from Sunday?
Yeah, it's big, right?
9.9 million viewers. To try and put that into perspective a little bit here, I think it was Richard Deitch from The Athletic, who does a lot of media column stuff. He said that was more than the Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, Notre Dame USC from last year, LSU Alabama from last year, Ohio State Penn State from last year. That was more than every NBA playoff game, excluding the NBA Finals, every Major League Baseball playoff game, excluding the World Series, every NASCAR race in the last 6 years, besides the Daytona 500, and every NHL game in the last 50 years.
That's impressive.
That is wild when you put it into those terms. Like when you get, college football in there, and even NBA playoff games in there, 9.9 million.
I think there are a number of factors in it. I think that women's basketball has its, one of the things that women's basketball probably has been helped in the last 20 years by some of the programs that are the most passionate for their men's team becoming competitive on the women's side has elevated the overall fan base. Because look at like Indiana, the number of people that are Indiana fans that really got into women's basketball.
I mean, Iowa, LSU have 2 very passionate fan bases.
North Carolina is another program that, now that they are in the last 25 years have become a women's player, there's that whole fan base that comes in. But you also have, a flamboyant coach for LSU and a dynamic player for Iowa that was on a streak like we hadn't seen before.
Next year the Big Ten TV rights get divvied up between Fox and CBS and NBC. I would assume that Caitlin Clark returning to Iowa, I would guess an Iowa-Indiana game might get put on one of those major networks, which I know we're not used to. Obviously, we had the women's title game on ABC, but I think that would be something with Indiana bringing back, a lot of what they had from last season, you would see. One thing I'm a little unsure of, and it seems like, this is like if Rosie was on a soccer team called the Watermelons or the Grapes or something thing to do. Did you see that Joe Biden is inviting both Iowa and LSU to the White House?
Really?
I feel like that's just like treating women's sports like
Everybody
it's like
gets a trophy,
a
Kevin.
participation trophy.
Everybody gets a trophy.
Okay, Iowa upset undefeated South Carolina. What? Am I missing something here? It's kind of a slap in the face at women's basketball that you're treating them so differently. You think San Diego State's going to get the invite?
If they had a key political caucus in San Diego, maybe.
San Diego State lost by less than Iowa did in the title game. You think people in Iowa are like, I'm voting for Biden now because he invited our Hawkeyes to the White House to hand him a participation trophy?
Mark, is that the fourth floor on line 5?
I hear Tony Katz behind me.
Yeah, they're
what are we doing here?
That's odd.
Will Haskett at 8, Talk Masters. Crazy Nestor from Baltimore. Are we good to say that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Crazy Nestor from Baltimore coming up at 8:30. Again, it is a no need for a jacket.
Do we know that Biden knows that LSU won and Iowa lost?
Well, that's probably a fair question. No jacket Tuesday here in Indianapolis. It is a great weather day. It does sound like tonight into Wednesday could get a little bit stormy, so hopefully after what several parts of the state had to deal with over the weekend, everything is relatively calm on that front. But again, it is a beautiful temperature walking outside here on this Tuesday morning. Kevin Bowe and Jake Quarry, Mark Dykton here on 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
College basketball last night, a new national champion. Congratulations to the University of Connecticut Huskies. Probably the most, for the last 25 years, the most dominant college basketball program for which you have never met a diehard fan or seen somebody wearing a sweatshirt on Las Vegas Boulevard. But an impressive run for the Huskies, who, Kevin, quite frankly, blitzed their way through the tournament. You were the one person when the brackets came out, I remember you said, you're like, man, Connecticut's playing well, and they never let off the accelerator.
Jake, they're the fourth team to win every tournament game by at least 13 points. 3 of those 6 wins, by the way, by over 20. The average was 20 points per win. That is the 4th highest in tournament history. How about this? This probably shows you what the Big East was like this year. Jake, they were 17-0 in their non-conference. Every game they won by at least 10.
I mean,
that's 3 national titles in 12 years. Last night, it was 76-59. Again, San Diego State did make one, I thought, really interesting run or put some game pressure on them, cut it to 5 with 5 minutes to go. Jordan Hawkins, though, hit a huge 3, and then a 9-0 run from there, put the game on ice. Afterwards, Danny Hurley on the toughness of his UConn Huskies.
I just think it's such a hard tournament to be successful in and navigate, and obviously, we the last 2 teams we've played, I mean, Miami, beating Houston and Texas back-to-back in Kansas City, I mean, that's a heck of a team. We played Alabama. We know how good they are. I mean, these guys, beating them and a Creighton team that this tournament's hard to navigate. It's not 7-game series. It's not 5-game series. And now with the extra COVID year and NIL and the portal, it's like, I think it's made things even more challenging for the biggest brands and the highest seeds to advance because there's so much parity.
Yeah, he points out in there, Jake, they beat Alabama by 15 earlier this year.
By the way, his accent, he's not from Kentucky, in case those are...
He kind of sounds like Jim Calhoun a bit.
I thought he sounded a little bit like an East Coast version of Rick Carlisle.
Okay. I could see that.
But in case you're wondering, I can't imagine that you wouldn't know this by now, brother of Duke legend Bobby Hurley, and their father is a legendary coach out of Jersey City, New York.
And a pretty cool moment for Danny watching his son dribble out the clock last night as UConn clinched the national title. All right, Major League Baseball yesterday. Mark, your Cubs stink. Reds 7, Cubs 6.
They won by a run, and they stink immediately.
3-1. That is your NL Central leaders, the Cincinnati Reds. Stop the season right now. What are we, 184th through the season? 162nd through the season?
We've played how many games?
We're 4 of 162.
Okay, so that would mean
140-something?
140.5.
So pretty much the season's over at this point, and the Reds will host here coming up in the playoffs.
Don't look now, but here come the Red Legs.
Thank you. Was that recorded yesterday?
Sure sounds like it.
Tucker Barnhart did have a hit in his return to Cincinnati. Other games of note yesterday, the White Sox get drubbed by the Giants 12-3. Guardians beat my A's 12-11. Tigers 7-6 over the Astros. The Cardinals lose 8-4 to
what
the
about,
Braves.
So in our little challenge here, who was the only winner yesterday? Cute fella in your Baltimore Orioles, shutting out the Rangers 2-0. The A's, as Kevin mentioned, you have the A's losing 12-11, and Mark, your Arizona Diamondbacks on the short end 5-4 against San Diego Padres.
It's okay. It's early.
Indianapolis Indians hit the road there in Louisville, take on the Bats all week long. The Pacers back in action tomorrow night. Again, 3 games left in the regular season for the Pacers. They are officially eliminated from the playoffs. What is it? Is it Knicks twice and the Pistons once? Does that sound right?
I had the schedule right in front. I don't even think Scotty sends the Pacers schedule anymore. He threw in the towel on it.
Again, no NBA games last night due to the national title. But yeah, they will host the Knicks
twice and Pistons.
Host the Knicks tomorrow night. Host the Pistons on Friday.
What a way to finish strong.
Close out the season in Madison Square Garden on Sunday afternoon. It's all about the Tankathon standing to this point. The Pacers are in 6th, 5, 6, 7, 8, separated by 1 game. So that will be what to watch for here this week. All right, we'll get some Masters talk in with Will Haskett coming up at the top of the hour. Crazy Nestor from Baltimore to get Lamar Jackson's side of it coming up at 8:30.
Crazy Nestor. Does he know that we're introducing him as Crazy Nestor?
I don't know if that's the most politically correct statement to make, but nonetheless.
This is a Jake Query booking, by the way. So
Oh, great. Just throw it at me, right?
Yeah.
I believe in the text you sent, you said, Nestor, Jake's guy.
Yeah. I'm like, I had him on a radio show twice.
We'll get back in the Colts conversation coming up next. Titled number 5 for the UConn Huskies last night. They had their lead cut to a couple possessions at different points in the second half, but like they've done all tournament long, they staved off everything and pulled away late for a 17-point margin there in the championship game. We'll get more into that here in just a second. We got a lot of Colts news this week related to their working out of the top quarterbacks in this 2023 draft class out in California. Yesterday for Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, reportedly heading to Lexington to work out Will Levis later in the week. I would assume Anthony Richardson falls in there somewhere as well. I thought it was I don't know, maybe Mark, you might have seen this. Did you see that it's kind of like behind the scenes look at the Bears trading back with Carolina? Carolina trading up to number 1. It's a really interesting story. I think it was Adam Johns. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Bears beat reporter. It was a great read, just basically the behind the scenes of Carolina and Chicago talking throughout this process and trading up to get the number 1 pick. And it clearly stated Carolina was the most aggressive team. But I found it interesting. There were a couple other teams that they mentioned in the story. One was the Raiders. The Raiders drafted 7. They had some talks with Chicago about possibly trading up. So I think to myself, okay, well, if the Raiders would have had talks to potentially trade up to 1, might they have talks to trade up to 3? Mm-hmm. Now, again, maybe it's C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, and they don't necessarily love the other two enough to do that. There was also a Colts mention in there, and Johns wrote that the Colts were also involved, but only to a certain point. The timing just wasn't right for Indy and some other clubs. Timing wasn't right. Jake, do you think the Colts could have any regret that the timing becomes right in April, but it's too late to move up to number 1?
No, I really don't. I had a gut feeling in the beginning, and I have seen no reason. That's not to sit here and say like, I know I was right, but I've not seen any indication to move me away from it, which is that the Colts went into the evaluation of players in this year's draft by saying to themselves, Kevin, we believe that and I want to make clear, I'm not saying this is what they're saying. I'm saying it appears to me that their thought process was, until we hear differently, we are entering this process under the assumption that the difference 1 to 4 is negligible, and that or is minute, and that what we would have to give up to move up spots is a greater variable than the difference 4 to 1. And until we are shown differently, we are sticking with that mindset. And as of right now, I believe now they are just now getting ready to go to really put these guys, as Rick Venturi calls it, through the car wash, right? They're right now is when they're, so you're right. They are waiting later than others to probably to do the true eval.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like, is that risky? It
is risky. That is a fair point by you.
And you can make the statement, Jake, that obviously what Carolina did involves risk. I don't want to deny that, Carolina trading up so early in the process. Frank Reich had been on the job for not a whole long time. Basically what Carolina said is, we are going to be aggressive and we're going to pay the price to make the first choice. And we feel like there will be a quarterback that will be worth that first choice, but we're going to make sure we get there before anybody else gets there. We want to have that ability to say, we're walking into the store first, the shelves are stocked, and we get the first pick. And if you are the Colts, you've got to be content with potentially making the 4th choice, depending on what happens at 3 with Arizona. And, of course, the question then becomes, and I think you were getting at this, let's just play out the hypothetical. Let's say C.J. Stroud goes 1. Let's say C.J. Stroud's the first quarterback taken, and let's say Will Levis is the 4th. Is the gap from Stroud to Levis enough to trade up to 1?
Yeah, well, first off,
that's a debate. Would you rather have C.J. Stroud, or would you rather have Will Levis and maybe your 1st and 2nd and let's throw in another second.
Here's the best way that I would say it, Kevin. With all four of these players, okay? With all four of these players, there's a risk. And so I think the Colts looked at it and said, there's already risk or gamble with each player. So there's no sense in further risking and gambling our future to get them. In other words, Bryce Young, there's a risk he's too short. Will Levis, there's a risk he's too inconsistent and weird. Anthony Richardson, there's a risk that he hasn't started enough games and seen what he can do against elaborate defenses. C.J. Stroud, there's a risk he was throwing to receivers that were so far superior to the talent that that's going to be an adjustment for him in the NFL. There is not an Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, Trevor Lawrence, absolute can't miss. Yeah, you got to go up and get this guy because he is a plug-and-play guy. I don't know that any of those four are that, and that's why it's like, you know what? So therefore, there's no sense in risking asset give up to get them.
Yeah, that's a very popular thought. A lot of people are like, there is no Burrow, there is no Lawrence, there is no Luck. But did we sit here and say that about Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert when they came out?
I get it,
and none of them were taken in the top 5 either.
No, I totally get it, but. Kevin, you could make the argument. I'm not saying it's I'm not saying that it's totally applicable in this situation. But if this were high school debate class and we were each assigned a side, you could make the argument that Josh Allen, Joe Burrow was number 1 overall. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, to your point, Justin Herbert. You could make the argument that those guys, in terms of their level of success and their quick acclimation without being drafted in the top 5, that those guys are exceptions to the rule. And life is a lot easier to navigate when you live by the rule than by the exception. So the law of averages would dictate, yes, you are correct, but it is a slippery slope to hang on to the outliers as opposed to go with the normal numerical pattern. And I think I think they're being conservative about it.
But isn't that what they've kind of always been under Ballard? I was talking with somebody within the organization yesterday who doesn't agree with Ballard's decision-making process, and the person said, I swear the guy never wants to take a chance. That's Ballard. He's been that way for 7 years. And, again, the definition of insanity is what? And it's got to feel like this is going down that path. And who knows? Maybe, Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, maybe they'll sit there at 4 and they will get that guy, but Carolina had urgency. Was some of that ownership driven? Probably. But you listen to, that statement, the Colts were also involved, but only to a certain point. The timing just wasn't right for Indy. Sometimes the timing does not match up with your perfect ideal timeline. Sometimes you can't go and check your work 1,000 times over and over again to make sure you're making the right move. Sometimes you got to take a risk. And that, I think, is the concern that I have, because I think there is a bit of a gap between C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young versus the other two guys.
Don't you think Chris Ballard could be saying the same thing? Like, if the timing's not right now, when is it? Because how many years are we going to be when is the timing right?
Well, how many times are you going to draft in the top 5? I mean, in an ideal world, you're not up there again. Shane Steichen wants no part of drafting the top 5 next year. So I think that comes into play as well.
I think I can tell you this. I mean, I've done this show with you for 19 months? Is that right? Something like that?
Feels like 5 years.
Yeah.
That's a compliment, actually, Mark.
It might be.
Right? The 3 amigos that we are, the 3 best buddies, and we're the 3 best friends that anybody can have. Mm-hmm. See? That's it feels like 5 years. You're right, because it feels like we've been together forever. But during that time, I know that we've talked plenty of Colts, we've talked plenty of Chris Ballard. I do think that there are chances, probably by default, that Ballard hears this program. And as he hears us talking now for the last 3 weeks on a fairly regular basis about Will Levis, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, I'll bet he's actually happy that we've deviated from position.
Definitely made me think. And I mean, Bowen, every time I freaking read or listen to Bowen, it's like a constant freaking barrage of whiteouts.
Who got the last laugh there, by the way?
I do. That is a strong Texan laugh, is it not?
It's a very arrogant laugh, yes.
Out in California.
It's actually an insecure one.
Sounds like, that was, that's a loaded question, right?
See, that's another loaded question. So you just keep leading me down this road here.
Yeah, Jake.
Okay.
Come on, man.
That was the question that was the most direct question of all time, remember?
That's a loaded question.
The Colts will begin their offseason program on Monday. So players get back into the building. That'll be Shane Steichen's first time really talking in front of a team meeting. And, the Colts typically have pretty good participation during the voluntary part of the offseason program. So offseason picking up steam. And, of course, 3 weeks from Thursday will be the NFL draft. I was curious, Jake, if you had anything else to add on this. I did see Pat Knight release a statement on behalf of the Knight family regarding his dad being released from the hospital. Had you heard anything else on that?
Yeah, so Bob Knight apparently had pneumonia. That's thus why it was listed as acute. And I did not know this. I had to look it up. An acute illness is one that comes on fairly suddenly, but is expected to be from which one would recover. So Bob Knight apparently did have a bout with pneumonia. I don't think I want to be careful here, just out of respect. I think that most people now know that Bob Knight has been navigating through some challenges that are a part of the aging process, and those things are accurate. And probably part of how and why, part of the reason that he moved back to Bloomington, I believe, is the familiarity of the area, as well as, just some of the access to physicians and treatments that were best for him. So, yes, Pat and I did issue the statement that he's been released, and then later came out it was pneumonia, and certainly hoping the best for him.
Yeah, from Pat Knight. On behalf of the Knight family, we thank you for thoughts and prayers. As many have heard, my dad was hospitalized over the weekend with an illness and has since been released from the hospital. We ask for your privacy as he is cared for and resting at home in good hands. Coach always taught us, and those that played for him, the importance of fighting through adversity, and he and our family thank you for the tremendous amount of support you have shown and given during this time. We appreciate your continued thoughts and prayers.
I think the one thing that I would say, Kevin, it is very easy for all of us, myself included, to when certain people or whatever it might be, certain facets, aspects of life, time is a difficult thing sometimes, and aging is a difficult thing, and it's very surreal. It's very surreal for me at the age of 50 to think about things from when I was like in high school or early college and think, wait a minute, my parents were 50 in that memory. And it's a surreal thing for me to think of my parents or my friends' parents or my parents' friends and realize that they are not in their 50s, they're in their 80s, thankfully in very good health. But I think that all of us have certain things that we hold on to because it takes us back to times and places when we felt life was more simplistic or fun or enjoyable or nostalgic. And Indiana basketball to a lot of people is exactly that. And so Bob Knight represents exactly that. But I think people also, with sometimes the delicate nature of one's aging or health challenges, needs to respect and understand that that person's lifespan is progressing in such that it doesn't necessarily automatically mean that when you're around them that you are right back to the time that was your happy place, because they have now struggles that they're contending with.
Sure. 82 years old, Bob Knight. Again, the national championship last night, it was UConn over San Diego State. The final was 76-59. I couldn't help but think watching UConn throughout the tournament, their best NBA prospect is Jordan Hawkins. Man, I know the Pacers might want a little bit of a taller wing, maybe one that's a little bit more defensive-minded, but boy, you watch him shoot the basketball, you watch his athleticism. They somehow ended up with him. A backcourt of him, Benedict Mathurin, and Tyrese Halliburton. That's pretty enticing.
UConn's won 5 titles in 24 years, and Kevin, who have been their best pros? I mean, it's one of 3: Richard Hamilton, Ray Allen, Rudy Gay, right? I mean, they've had really good players, but it's not like it's this factory that's just churning out dynamic
Kemba Walker
basketball.
in there.
Kemba Walker's probably up there. I mean, Emeka Okafor was a great college player. Khalid Al-Amin was a great college player. Scotty Burrell was a great college player.
Embiid obviously was a bust.
Yeah, I mean, but my point being,
Jeremy Lamb.
I mean, it's a program that has been massively effective without being massively transcendent.
Yeah, I do think Hawkins is a wonderful talent.
He is.
And again, maybe the baby face, maybe the slender frame, how he comes off those screens and shoots it, that you get some Reggie Miller vibes watching him out there. He had the big one last night that San Diego State cut it to 5. That pushed it to 8. It was a 9-0 run for UConn from there, and they put the game on ice. All right, we've got some I know Jake's been waiting for this segment really for months.
Right.
We have not had a major championship in golf since last July. That brings the LIV golfers back to Augusta National. Creates quite the drama. We'll chat about that with Will Haskett. Coming up next here, Kevin and Query on what looks like an overcast start to this Tuesday, but it's a really nice temperature outside, so probably don't need the jacket today. Kevin and Query right here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The Fan.
It's a beautiful ambiance from Mark Dykton bringing us back here. Don't think CBS will have that as their rejoiner music, though, coming up this weekend.
If Happy Gilmore was playing, they would.
Now, would it shock you guys if I told you that I've actually been to the site of the Leonard Skinnard plane crash in the Mississippi-Louisiana border.
That might be the least surprising thing you've told us.
I thought at first you were going to say you've been to Augusta National.
I have not, actually. That would be cool.
Do you have any desire, again, not a golf fan or certainly not a big golf fan, do you have any desire? Is that like...
I don't dislike golf.
Sports bucket list at all?
Yeah, I think going to... Here's the problem. Some of the fanaticism that some people have about like going to a practice round, I think would kind of turn me off to it, but I certainly respect.
Was that a shot at me?
No, I don't mean that. I mean the guys that like feel like because they bought a pass to it, they're now like as much a part of golf as Tiger Woods. But yeah, I mean I have a great respect for the facility, the history, the heritage. I mean, it would be very cool for sure.
To get more into this year's Masters, Will Haskett, PGA Tour Radio, joins us right now. Will, I guess let's just start here. Let's fast forward to Sunday. Let's fast forward to the back nine. Jim Nantz is just waxing poetic with us. What would be the dream back nine duel for you for this Masters?
Thank you for being my friend, guys, and having me on today. A little Jim Nantz run there.
Very well done.
I think, boy, there's so many different ways, Kevin, you can go with that question. There are three players in the game of golf right now who are at a different level than everybody else. It's Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and Jon Rahm. It's been that way for about 6 months, with Scheffler sort of responding back in the beginning of 2023 the way that he kind of burst onto the scene last year to become the top player in the game. So if I'm looking strictly at it from who are the best golfers in the world right now, it's those three. So you'd like to see some combination of them at their peak, because their peak right now is just so much better than everybody else's. But obviously the answer here is one of them, probably Rory, definitely Rory, against Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, Cameron Smith,
Patrick Reed.
I think Patrick Reed is lost. I mean, I think him winning a Masters was great, but he doesn't have the overall superstar skill game that I think that attracts fan attention the way that Liv was hoping some of the guys that they were able to buy are attracting sort of names. So if this was 10 years ago and we were in this sort of conundrum of tours, it'd be Phil Mickelson. But I think it's probably Brooks Koepka won last week. I don't know if anybody knew that or is paying attention to it, but he won the third live event of the year down in a goat ranch in Florida, which looked awful on TV. But it was, it's something. It's a little something. And if you read behind the scenes and sort of hear like what some of the guys are saying, and some of them may have buyer's remorse and some of them don't, and they want to have this week to sort of prove it, then that's probably the juiciest one that you have. I don't think Jim Nantz wants that. I think Jim Nantz wants a more flowery, probably pro PGA Tour one and sort of stay away. I'm sure Augusta National doesn't want to have this whole week turn into a referendum on Liv versus the PGA Tour either. But I think if you're looking at it from a fan interest standpoint and you want to grab your popcorn, you want one of those marquee Liv guys. If Bryson DeChambeau was playing anywhere near the quality of golf he was playing 2 years ago, it'd be a different story, but he's a shell of his former self right now too as a golfer. But yeah, any of those marquee Liv guys against probably Rory gets it done.
Now, can an alternate golf league that plays at a goat ranch call it a goat ranch if Tiger Woods is not there?
That's a great point. And that's a little unfair to Orange County or whatever it was they were playing on, but it was a public access golf course that had golf going on in the other 18 holes of the 36-hole property, and it just wasn't in the best shape. Now, is it cool to see some of the best guys in the world play on a golf course that's a daily fee for, us regular mortals? Absolutely. It's probably more similar last week to what Liv guys were playing on than, obviously this week, which is the most pristine kept property in the entire sport. But so that may be me being a little bit unfair and showing my cards here and how I view Liv in the world of professional golf. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If Tiger's not there, it's not a full goat ranch.
Will, let me ask you this. Will Haskett is our guest. He's on the Payless Liquors hotline. When it comes to the Masters and Augusta National, Kevin and I were talking about it yesterday, and there are obviously certain players that their style of play really applies to Augusta National, which is clearly a challenging course. Now, I think of it as myself being kind of a golf novice in terms of my playing. I think of golf as really like one of three ways. You're either a guy that can hit the ball really far off the tee to give yourself an advantage. John Daly comes to mind. You're a guy that regardless of where your ball lands, you have an incredible ability to know what club to use and what strategy to use in terms of the placement to understand angles. Or you're a guy that is just a really good short game putter on the green. Now, I'm being very generic, I realize. But for this particular course and what makes the Masters what it is, which of those three do you most need to be, and which player most kind of strangely fits the mold of Augusta National while being maybe an average player elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really think that there is an average player elsewhere that can be good here. I think you have to be elite. With data and the improvement of analytics in the sport, I think it's proven that Augusta National is a second-shot golf course. And so by that, it's the second of the three that you gave me. You have to be a really, really elite iron player, I think, to be successful here. Now, can you have a absolutely out-of-your-mind short game week and roll in putts and chip, and chip at a high level and be viable? Absolutely. And this is a golf course that will expose you if you're not putting well, and especially if you don't have a good short game. Length, I think, when this golf course got longer because they were trying to quote-unquote tiger-proof it at the turn of the century, it only played into the hands of the guys who are already hitting it farther. I think they did themselves a disservice in terms of how the sport is. We've learned more about that. But, yes, this is a golf course that I think in perfect conditions lends itself to guys who are completely in control of their golf ball with their irons. The greatest iron player of all time, in my opinion, is Tiger Woods, and he was elite on this golf course because you have to be able to place the golf ball in the absolute perfect positions because of the segmented nature of these greens and the slope and in terms of attack. Now, Phil Mickelson was really good at this golf course too, and he's a bit more of an aggressive player. Tiger, and this is kind of a weird thing to say, Tiger was a very conservative golfer. He was just really, really stinking good, and so his conservative play was better than most guys' aggressive plays at the stage of his life, at the stage of the career when he was playing. But for Phil Mickelson, was always an aggressive player, and aggressiveness can pay off on this golf course when you're dialed in. So to answer your question about somebody who maybe is off the radar, I don't really know. We don't see off-the-radar winners here very often. If you go back through the years, guys that are playing at an elite level of golf arriving at Augusta are typically the ones that win. The only guy in the last 10 years that I would say wasn't an elite form when he won was Hideki Matsuyama a couple of years ago. And that was a really weird situation because a front came through, the golf course went from being really firm to really soft, and he took advantage of it after the rains. And Hideki Matsuyama is an elite iron player, so he could always find it when he needed to. But pretty much everybody else over the last decade, we have not had a fluky winner since golf got really, really deep over the last 10, 15 years.
You using past tense for Tiger Woods has me a little nervous for my inevitable Tiger question that's coming up here in a few. Will Haskett, PGA Tour Radio, is with us. Will, I've been, I think, pretty clear in my stance against live golf, the lack of competition. I just don't think it's really what anything resembling what the PGA Tour is about from a competition standpoint and the meritocracy that comes with it. Having said that, I can't deny at all it's created unbelievable drama and headlines for the game of golf that I think is actually pretty good from an entertainment and an eyeball standpoint. Having said that, would it be better for the game of golf for Tiger Woods to win on Sunday or for a live guy to win on Sunday?
Tiger always. The ratings number for Tiger Woods being in it, it doesn't matter.
What about 5 years down the road if you're able to create a bit of a live PGA Tour rivalry?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, Tiger's in a different stratosphere, and to get off on a totally different topic, I think what live was always banking on was this idea that people were attracted to big names and big names only. And I think we've seen that there's really only one big name over the last 25 years that truly moves the needle. He is the needle. And so I think that they've sort of failed in that structure and that they haven't created a competitive product. And people want to see elite guys, but they also want to see competitive juices. They don't want to see elite guys for the sake of seeing elite guys. But to answer your question, I understand what you're doing. Yes, for Liv's sake, they need a good week. I don't think professional golf needs this to exist to where you are having two factions fighting with one another. The PGA Tour has come up with their sort of new solution to deal with this reality, and the tour is going to it's looking very different this year. It's going to look a little bit more different next year, and that's a different debate for a different show at a different time. I don't think professional golf is healthy when you have two factions that are splintering the best products, the best entertainers in the sport in the two different areas. So I would say no, having a live golfer winning helps professional golf because all it does is it emboldens them to continue in the path that they're on. I think you need to drive a couple of these guys out of their contracts and back to the PGA Tour. In order for that to happen, they have to realize, oh, man, I'm not sharp going into these tournaments that I truly care about because I'm not playing enough and I'm not playing enough quality rep golf on live. And I think that's the only way to say it. I'm not saying that the PGA Tour is perfect. I'm not saying that it's the best thing that's ever happened in professional golf the way that it's structured right now. But I don't think golf, which is already a niche sport to begin with, can afford to have two different things. I've compared this a lot of times to open wheel racing. You know, there were good sides to both between IRL and kart back in the day. I hated the split from the moment that it happened, and I don't think the sport ever recovered from that split. You can't take a niche sport and split it up, even though both sides have great intentions, and expect it to last long term and then have everybody come back to that product when you finally reunify.
Okay, on the Tiger, I think it was very well said, by the way. On the Tiger front, again, your past tense usage, and you've always very understandably and correctly have tempered expectations of mine with Tiger here in recent years. I would say the form at Riviera earlier this year was intriguing to me. Will, the weather forecast for this week, I like the start of it. I don't like what I'm seeing from rain and some cooler temps around Friday, Saturday, if Tiger makes it to Saturday. Your thoughts on Tiger Woods at the 2023 Masters?
Yeah, I got to see every shot he hit at Riviera earlier this year. And again, it's remarkable with what his body has gone through, what he's able to sort of do. But between the plantar fasciitis, the reassembled leg, it's such a hard walk. And I know that he's totally capable of doing it and he's going to gut his way through it. But it's a 4-round tournament, Kevin. And, he could be 2 off the lead on Thursday or 3 off the lead on Thursday.
Well, last year he had a great opening round.
Right. He's got to play 72 holes and walk around that place. And it's just going to be too hard. It's too hard on his body. Him making the cut is great. Him being in tournaments is great. He is going to be present as much as he can in the majors and, 3 or 4 events a year. We're going to see him 8 times a year. And let's just keep him upright. I mean, honestly, that's it. He just can't generate. I mean, what he did in 2019, in many respects, was kind of miraculous. It proved his greatness, and then he rolled a car down a mountain. It's like I didn't think 19 was possible, and then it happened. So you could say, oh, well, then anything's possible. It's like, yeah, but look at what else happened since 2019. So let's get him through the cut. Let's get as many walks up 18 on Sunday, waving the hat as we can. He's not going to win the golf. He can't win the golf tournament. There are some golf courses out there where I think he could still compete and win. This just isn't one of them because of the physical limitations that he's under right now.
Okay, here are my 3 picks. You ready? I've done a long deep dive on this. Sam Burns.
Okay. Great putter. His iron game over the last 12 months is not where it was when he was at a higher level last year. So I've worried about the iron game, but he played well in match play a couple weeks ago. So you never know. He's probably one of the top 10, 15 putters in the field. Yeah.
He's got you right where he wants you with that.
And he's an LSU product if he's feeling some momentum from Kim Mulkey and company.
Right. Hideki Matsuyama.
Where's the jacket? Yeah. Again, he did it. We saw it 2 years ago. He can pull a rabbit out of the hat. He just hasn't shown me that he's the same player that there were a couple of years where he was, top 5 favorite going in, and he just ironically kind of won the year where he wasn't on anybody's radar. So could he do it? Yeah, sure. I mean, he could find that form, but he's just not the same guy that he was when he won a couple of years ago.
Okay, Cameron Young.
Yeah, I love Cameron Young this week. The putter concerns me a little bit. He's already made a grip switch there because the ball's just not going in the hole. So I did an eliminator yesterday and eliminated him from being a winner just because his putting numbers are below average this year. But he made a switch in caddy a couple weeks ago. He's got Webb Simpson's longtime former caddy on the bag, Paul Tesori. I think that's a huge boost. Absolute ball striking Jesse, to steal a phrase from a couple of guys I work with on PGA Tour Radio. He hits it a mile. His irons are awesome. I'm bullish on Cameron Young this week.
Okay, I want to get to that eliminator here in just a second, but let's go back to Liv. 18 Liv golfers in the field. For those unfamiliar with who is on Liv, You've got Cameron Smith, the defending Open champion. You've got Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed, Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, Phil Mickelson. I mean, you got some household names. If I set the over-under, Will, at 1.5 live golfers to finish in the top 10, what are you taking?
I'd take the over on that one. I mean, I think DJ sets up perfectly on this golf course. He hasn't been as dominant, you would think, just kind of watching live over the last couple of weeks. I think Brooks is motivated to show that he's, found a little something, because if anybody watched the Netflix documentary, and I thought the most compelling episode was his episode, and so sort of showing how frustrated he was at this time a year ago, realizing he wasn't as good as Scotty Scheffler. So I think there's some willpower in him and some burn in his gut to try and get it done. And then you could throw another guy in there, maybe Amito Pereira, who's a rookie this year, has a good showing. Taylor Gooch has been playing. I mean, there's some guys that could end up in the top 10. I think it's safe to say, given 18 guys in a field of less than 90, that 3 of those 18 world-class players, or even 2 of them, find their way into the top 10 when it's all said and done. And you get backdoor top 10s too, Kevin. You know how this sort of works.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think it's a safe thing to take the over on that one.
Okay, and on the eliminator front, again, this is over at willhaskett.com. It's a great piece, super detailed, and trying to pick the winner here. A little bit off the radar, and again, off the Rory, Rahm, Scheffler radar. A healthy Jason Day intrigues me. What did you see from an eliminator standpoint on Day, and what did that spit out for you?
Yeah, Jason Day is playing at an elite level over the last several months. He reworked his swing to try and to take some of the pressure off of his back. Every single week, he is a candidate to have something flare up. I mean, he could not make it to the tee on Thursday. It's completely possible. But he has been playing at a winning golf level over the last several months. I actually thought that he was one of my short list guys to win the Players a couple of weeks ago, because I thought he set up really well for that golf course. Had an okay showing when it was all said and done. Jason Day has come close to winning this golf tournament before. He's hitting the ball really well. It's only a matter of time, I think, this year until he wins a golf tournament, and he has the number one player in the world type of pedigree, the major champion, to be able to get it done. So, yeah, if you get away from those guys at the top of the sport right now, Jason Day has been playing like a top 10, top 20 player in the world, and that's what you need to be playing like in order to win at Augusta. So, yes, I think he's more than viable this week.
And on your end, did I see the completion of the Grand Slam for the eliminator?
Yes. Yeah, and that's a completely objective opinion. Scotty Scheffler is actually playing better golf right now than he was playing entering the Masters last year, which is a scary thought. He was the best player in the world, arrived here last year and proved it, and he's a half shot better compared to himself last year at this exact same time. So if you said, hey, Will, put everything into a computer and spit it out, who's going to win, it's probably Scotty Scheffler. But you open this interview talking about what would you like to see coming down the stretch on Sunday. And in this world of split professional golf, the guy who has been the loudest voice for the tour side of things, for this idea of meritocracy and what the new world order is going to look like, it's Rory McIlroy. And not only completing the career Grand Slam, but to do it in an emphatic way, I think would be the ultimate story. Now, we've seen Rory have the opportunity to tell a lot of those types of stories before, and he doesn't necessarily get it across the line or have that sort of killer instinct. But if the golf course gets wet and it gets soft, it plays more into his hands and his length off the tee. So I went more with the great story than necessarily the best one at the end there, because, again, head says Scheffler, heart says Rory. I went with the heart at the end, and let's see if we can get it done.
Now, how about this? Mike Weir, I kind of like that because Michael Weir is the lead singer of The Elect, and they're fabulous. I love seeing them at the Beer Garden.
I think Michael Weir of The Elect could beat Mike Weir, the golfer.
Sandy Lyle.
Sandy
Lyle was the name of the character that Philip Seymour Hoffman played in Along Came Polly, and I liked him.
He's going to play probably wearing suspenders, Jake, so it's worth tuning in to see Sandy in the suspenders.
Yeah, his outfit is a must every year.
And how old is Sandy?
He's probably got to be one of the oldest in the field, if not the oldest.
Yeah, 60 plus there, yeah.
What do we got, Bernhard Langer?
Yeah, he's
Larry Mize.
66 this year, and Langer could still make the cut, which is just insane how good he's playing.
Oh, see, I was looking at him. I'm impressed by him. I think he's on a hot streak.
Yeah, the Champions Tour, Jake's just locked into that week out.
So what we're getting at is you either go Cameron Young or 3 guys old, right? Sandy Lyle, VJ Singh.
Well, Will's pulling out the heartstrings a little bit there. Jim Nance would love to see Rory walking up the 72nd hole on Sunday with the lead.
He might retire from golf broadcasting if that one happens. He might just walk it all off at that point in time. Yeah, no, that would be crazy. Hey, here's a crazy name off the radar for you. I'm not saying he's going to win, but there's a 19-year-old amateur from Vanderbilt.
Mr. Sargent.
He won the NCAA tournament last year, and they gave him an exemption. He hits it at absolute mile off the tee. I think he's going to make the cut. If you pay attention to a lot of metrics, he's already playing at an above-average professional level in college right now. I think he could make some noise this week and be somebody that we're talking about a little bit on the weekend, and maybe even vies for a top 10 or a top 20 finish.
Yeah, his amateur career has been absolutely incredible so far. Gordon Sargent, definitely a name to watch. Will, great stuff, man. And it sounds like if it works for you, we'll have you back on Monday to recap it all.
I thought are we gonna have our weekend Twitter date again to argue about Lamar Jackson versus rookie quarterback?
So are you chips in the table for Lamar? Is that what I was seeing there?
No. My question is if you truly feel like you should have matched the Carolina Panthers offer to go all into the number one pick, then why not the proven quarterback commodity? And I understand the salary cap stuff. Don't get me wrong. I understand the money aspect of it. But you can't want one and not then sort of want the other if you were really chipped in.
You want my answer on that, Will?
Go ahead.
I think it is a subtle indictment by the Colts brass over an admission that their roster is not 2 to 3 years away.
Yeah, I agree with that. But if you move up to take the Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud number one, you're sort of mortgaging your future also in that one. So if they're not going to do either, then I'm okay with that. Because you're saying we value our top picks to build a roster long term,
which is what I think it is.
Right, but I don't think you can say they should have done everything possible to get to number one, and then say, "Oh yeah, but they shouldn't. This is too much of a price tag to go get Lamar Jackson." It's either both, or it's none. In my opinion,
I think playing style, you can't ignore that too. The staying power of a C.J. Stroud is more of a pocket guy versus the staying power of a Lamar Jackson into his 30s. Enjoyed that back and forth.
Let's go Hendon Hooker, second round. Let's go Hendon Hooker. Let's go. Come on, let's make this happen.
And everybody's convinced they're the only franchise that's figured that out. That's what cracks me up, right?
Will,
all right, boys. We'll talk Monday.
Great stuff. Thank you. That's Will Haskett right there on the Payless Liquors hotline. This from Mike in the YouTube chat. I can empathize a bit here with Mike. He goes, my son was born during the 1 hour rain delay in 2019. We watched every shot up until then, popped in for a quick C-section. Then we were back in the recovery room, play resumed.
Okay.
You think his wife calls it popped in for a quick C-section?
Yeah. I'm sure she has a very different perspective on that, I'm sure.
April 14th, 2019 was Tiger Woods' win at the Masters, of course. April 14th, 2018 was my engagement to Maddie. There has been some internal debate in the Bowen household on which April 14th carries a little bit more weight.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Now, I had a furious debate that I'm not necessarily wanting to reawaken because I know which way you'll go on it.
Well, we got Crazy Nestor coming up in 5.
When that happened, people were like, this is the greatest moment in sports. And I'm like, 20 years from now, people will remember he won. But, like, the exact specifics, this is not the Miracle on Ice. And people are like, no, it's going to be right there along with the Miracle. And I'm like, okay. I think the Tiger Woods fans, yes, that's true. I think the most fans are like, yeah, I remember he won. That was cool. Kurt Kitayama.
Did you hear Mike? Literally. Oh, yeah, popped in for a quick C-section. Ran to the gas station during the rain delay. Got a bag of chips.
Well,
got back on the couch here.
Mike would have other variations that would make that day very memorable, yes, to go along with it.
Kurt Kitayama, yeah, very hot golfer right now. I think 19th in the world, 20th in the world.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to write him down.
Cameron Young, college for Cameron Young?
Cameron Young's college, you're asking me?
Mm-hmm.
Duke.
Couldn't be closer.
Carolina.
Very close.
Wake Forest.
Boom. A great lineage of golfers. Will Zalatoris, Arnold Palmer, among others.
I knew it was one of them because I remember when he committed.
He did the hat thing.
You were watching on stream, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
Yeah, New York product, Cameron Young to Wake Forest. All right, morning checkdown.
The morning checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
76-59. The UConn Huskies cut down the Nets last night for their 5th national title since 1999. They're up 12 at half. San Diego State did make a couple of, not like complete runs, but they cut it to 6 and 5 at different points. UConn, of course, answered every single one of those. Adamas Sonogo is your most outstanding player. And Jake, the stat that just stands out to me more than anything about UConn, 3 national titles in the last 12 years by 3 different coaches.
Unbelievable. And as I'd mentioned earlier this morning, Indiana won its 5th national title in 1987. And, they went back to the Final Four 5 years after that. They won 3 of them in 11 years. Since Indiana's 5th title, we've now seen 2 programs, Duke and Connecticut, win 5 themselves. We've seen Kansas win 3. We've seen Louisville win, I guess it would be 2. No, 1. 1, I guess, for Louisville, right? Kentucky win, 3? Carolina win 3. I mean, it's been a rough slog. But Connecticut has now put itself, not that it wasn't already there, but one of the preeminent programs in college basketball, and yet kind of randomly, and I know that sounds weird, but it's just a different program than the rest, but has absolutely been the cream of the crop for a quarter century now.
The margin of victory for UConn, 20 points per game here in the tournament. That's the 4th highest in tourney history.
NBA, there were no games last night because of the fact that the NCAA, when did they start doing that, by the way?
Yeah, I think a couple years ago. I think you try and stray away from that. I think you try and stray away from a little bit of the national championship for football as well on that Monday in January. So I think it's smart by the NBA.
Pacers and Knicks tomorrow night, by the way.
Major League Baseball recap from yesterday. The Reds beat the Cubs 7-6. The Cardinals lost. So really in Reds country, that's probably the best day they've had in their fandom in years. Tigers over the Astros 7-6. Guardians beat the Athletics 12-11. White Sox lose to the Giants 12-3. The Indianapolis Indians back in action today down in Louisville as they have their first road trip of the season. Jake, who we got next?
Nestor Aparicio has been a long-time radio host and writer in Baltimore, covering Baltimore sports, and get his perspective on. He's been covering a lot about Lamar Jackson and that situation with the Ravens, so we'll get his perspective next.
Need new tires? Skip the
Halfway through the 8 o'clock hour, Jake Query along with Kevin Bowen. Mark Dykton here as well. Warm start to the morning, which is a good thing. Not necessarily sun splashed this morning, but happy April to you. Connecticut, your national champion. The other big story we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, even though I feel like it's kind of cooled from the Indianapolis side, so I wanted the Baltimore perspective and decided to reach out to Nestor Aparicio, who I met a couple of years ago on Radio Row at the Super Bowl, and kind of a lightning rod of Baltimore sports, which I love because he's not afraid to share his opinion on all things Baltimore sports. He joins us now on the Payless Liquors hotline. WNST is where you can hear him in the state of Maryland. Nestor, let's begin with this. Good morning and thanks for your time. But from the Ravens standpoint, what's the narrative or the thought process? Is this all smoke and Lamar Jackson's going to end up staying a Raven, or do you think they are actively looking to find him a home elsewhere?
Well, I think there's definitely bruised feelings on both sides. I think they don't want an angry quarterback that's going to hold out of OTAs. I mean, Harbaugh's the guy that gets rung up by the league for practicing too much, and breaking the rules in that way, that he doesn't like not having his quarterback around. He's got a new offensive coordinator. So it's a fascinating push and pull for everything that happened here over the last year, beginning with the OTAs, the fact that he's his own agent, which is its own nightmare that's built into this. It's one thing to be your own agent when you're only negotiating with your team trying to get a deal. When you're trying to pit other teams against each other, this has been an epic failure for him to maximize his value. His agent has failed him as well, but he is his own agent, right? So same as a guy has his own lawyer. But during the season, the injury, the fact that it looked like he made some business decisions during the year, and after the injury, the fact that the team told the NFL Network, told the media, he'll be back at Christmas, he'll be back for the playoffs, he'll be back, and he was really never heard from again. And when he was heard from, he was heard from on social media in very untoward ways. He went after a fan in Pennsylvania with some profane tweets after a loss, and it really wasn't heard from much until he announced his injury and said he was injured more than they said he was injured. And this is, of course, after he didn't show up for the playoff game. And there's two sides of that story as well as to why he wasn't just waving a towel at a playoff game as the franchise leader. So there's definitely problems in the relationship. Can they be solved? That's between Lamar and the franchise at this point. I would say for him and this last 3-4 weeks, I don't think if the internet believed that there'd be no bidding on him. I'm not sure what Eric figured out in your Fairtown a few weeks ago when Eric DaCosta was in town sniffing around late night talking to other general managers, other ownership groups, people saying who wants him, what's the real price, where does the negotiation begin? And, of course, DeMar Smith screaming collusion, right? So this is as thick a story. I've been on the air here 31 years. I mean, I go back to not having a football team, being on the radio here, Cal Ripken, 21-31, Ray Lewis, all sorts of things. We've had 2 parades here. I've never seen a story like this because I really don't know where it's going to end up. I just can't imagine he's going to happily roll back into camp in August and play for $32 million. The thought that that's going to happen here seems foolish.
Nestor, when you bring up business decisions, you bring up him not showing up to the playoff game. For us in this market, when Chris Mortensen talks, it carries a little bit of weight, and I say that because Jim Irsay and him have a very close relationship. Mortensen mentioned last week that, among other things, the contract, the draft picks you'd have to give up, there are some questions about nutrition and sleep habits when it comes to Lamar Jackson. Is that, well known in the Baltimore area, and is that true?
You know what? This is the first I've heard of it. Now, keep in mind, Lamar doesn't do any interviews with anyone. The only time he sort of has stepped out of the box, Rolling Stone did an interview with him that really worked into race and politics and his friendship with Kodak Black, and it got cut off instantly. So I've never really heard Lamar sit and talk about anything, really. His background, his thoughts, his hopes, he's not – and he has no agent. He's his agent. This notion that this guy was calling around with his goofy gym 2 weeks ago, the only nutrition we've seen with Lamar is that. We see that he's a kid that plays video games. He's a kid that hangs out on the internet. He had this great relationship with Hollywood Brown. He tweeted at the franchise last year in the middle of the draft, WTF, when they traded Hollywood Brown, when everybody in the organization swears they told him that they were trading his buddy because his buddy asked to be traded. So this has just turned into sort of a nightmarish scenario, I think, for Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh, that they have this special kid, this special talent. They haven't been able to negotiate with him. He hasn't played a football game in December or January the last 2 years. He wants top of market because of what Jimmy Haslam did in Cleveland, and there's no one to negotiate with, including his mother, who's always been implicated as being, a bit of a front for him. And obviously on draft night, you've seen the pictures of him in the green suit, in the green room, waiting until hearing his name called when the Ravens dealt back into the first round. This has become a business problem for the Ravens, in a way that, maybe Andrew Luck leaving Indianapolis in the way he did became a problem for the franchise, but Steve owns the team. Harbaugh feels like he has a job for life. Eric DeCosta waited 15 years to get the gig and has the gig now. Those are made guys, and they behave in every way with the media, in the town, with this arrogance that life will go on. I don't know. They haven't had a whole lot of 4 and 13s around here. We haven't drafted in the top 10 much in 27 years. But if it comes down to being held hostage for 3, 4, 5 years by Lamar Jackson, when whatever they know about Lamar Jackson is more than anybody else knows about Lamar Jackson. But I don't think they're of the mindset that he's going to come back and play for what the franchise tag is. And I think they're now thoughts are starting to wither that there's going to be any suitor. That if Jim Irsay's not the guy, and if Arthur Blank's not the guy, and if Stephen Ross wasn't the guy, and if the Glazer brothers aren't the guys, who wants to sign him? Who is going to give him what he wants, which is, in excess of $200 million of guaranteed money, and basically the keys to your franchise for the next 4 to 6 years, depending on how you would structure a deal, where the guarantees would lie. And meantime, the Ravens aren't negotiating with themselves. The Ravens put him out there on this non-exclusive franchise to say, hey, go find your best deal. Go find a suitor. And it really is amazing, and it's amazing to the Players Association as well, how quickly the suitors all dried up. I mean, to our knowledge, Lamar never got on a plane, right? Lamar never flew and talked to anybody anywhere. We monitor these jets, and everybody seems to know where Jim Irsay and the Jim Irsay collection are. I'm always looking for where Mike Mills and Mellencamp's band are, by the way. But I love Jim Irsay, by the way. I'm the Baltimore guy that has a relationship with him. But I mean, I don't know why another team with a top 4 draft pick would want to give away a draft unless they're absolutely in love with Lamar Jackson. And I don't think Lamar Jackson, the agent, has done his client, Lamar Jackson, the player. This has been one of the worst agenting jobs in the history of the National Football League. When you look at his talent, his MVP trophy, where he is, where the franchise is, the fact that nothing ever got negotiated, and now he's sitting here with this crazy, bad franchise tag thing and no suitor in the league, and the NFL Players Association in his ear saying, "You're being Kaepernicked here, dude. You know what I mean? You've been colluded against. They are suppressing your value and your salary based on the system, and the system's eating him up right now."
Do you think, Nestor, that Nestor Aparicio is our guest in Baltimore? He's on the Payless Liquors hotline. Do you get the impression? I think sometimes organizations or franchises, Baltimore's, the Ravens have been a very good franchise. They've been competitive virtually every year through different rotations. They seemingly, again, outside perspective, they have stability. We know who is in charge, and they seem to always have the right pieces. But when they have a dynamic talent like a Lamar Jackson, does an organization that has had success then suddenly fool itself into thinking that the success is all theirs and that he is a guy that can immediately be replaced? In other words, hey, we're the Baltimore Ravens. You might have been an MVP, but we're the Baltimore Ravens. We'll just put another one in there, and they'll be an MVP because that's the culture that we have. Is that a dangerous thing to get into, but is there a chance that Baltimore feels that way in this situation?
Well, they're 2 for 2 picking quarterbacks going back to 2008, right? I mean, they've nailed their quarterbacks without having to suck. They haven't had to pick first. suck for luck or whatever you guys did, right? Like, they haven't had that here because Flacco was a guy they traded up to get. They fell in love with him. They saw him as a Division I quarterback who went to Pitt and fell out of favor and did everything he needed to do at Delaware. And then he came in and took him to the playoffs 5 years in a row, won a Super Bowl, right? You could have won 2. We should have been in Indianapolis if Billy Cundiff made the kick. Had there been a timeout, we probably would have been the ones there that day, right? So I can go back to that, and all of that is Bisciotti has made himself into a billionaire. Eric DeCosta has bided his time and still has Ozzie Newsome. Ozzie still has an office in the building. Ozzie's still there plenty. Ozzie's still a part of what they do. And then there's John Harbaugh, who Eric DeCosta was in on the hiring process when John Harbaugh was hired in 2008, and my partner Brian Billick was thrown out. And that's 16 seasons now ago that happened. So they've drafted 2 quarterbacks. They traded back into the first round. Listen, John was talking revolution around. He was like Fidel Castro and Che Guevara coming out of the hill. Revolution. Now, 4 years later, they've had this revolution where they can't sign wide receivers in the free agent market. They haven't done a very good job of drafting them. So putting talent around Lamar was a problem. They had a left tackle that was hurt for a year and a half. And now Lamar is a guy that I think anybody who's watched him play, watched the style of football, he runs into linebackers. I didn't like that from the beginning. You know who else didn't like that? 31 other teams passed on him and said he runs into linebackers. That's not going to be a formula for success for us, that he's going to run the ball 12, 15 times. He ran the ball 21 times in an NFL game a year and a half ago and literally was never heard from again that season. So the organization built everything around him, and then when it came time to pay him, they begged him to take their money the last 2 years and get to a market contract where he was making $40, $45, $48 million a year. He refused to do that because it was never top of class. And quite frankly, now that we see this play out, I'm not sure he had the sophistication level or the people around him explaining to him what the risk-reward ratio would be. That, Lamar, what happens if you don't play the end of the 21 season, you get injured? What happens if you don't play the end of the 22 season and you get injured? Who's going to want you? Well, maybe Jim Irsay, and maybe not. And, I saw Kravitz's piece last week. I had Bob on my show as well. I mean, we're out of seats here. I'm in Baltimore. I'm Lamar-a-thoned out. We're fatigued here on the story, right? I mean, literally.
That's why we called you, Nestor.
It's 6 months of talking about this, and at the end of the day, we're talking about whether a billionaire is going to want to front $200 million and the keys to his franchise to a guy who tweets poop emojis. You know what I mean? Like, literally. And that's what his agent does. And I think this has been a cautionary tale for guys without agents and how the business of the league really works. And the Players Association is going to be heard from. They're going to scream bloody murder throughout all of this. But this is, to your point, this is exactly what the Baltimore Ravens have managed to avoid since Ray Lewis was in handcuffs, right? And Jamal Lewis had some off-the-field issues. They had a kid die in the middle of camp last year. I mean, a veteran guy was found dead, and you can Google that, Jalen Ferguson. I mean, this is a franchise that's had Ray Rice punch his wife in a glass elevator, and then everybody no speaky, no seat it until it was week 1, and it's all on TMZ. So this is an organization that's had problems, it's had drama, but it never invites drama. And to me, thinking you're going to have a disgruntled quarterback play for $32 million who's ghosted and who's out on the internet, literally attacking the coach as he's coming to the podium to sit down at the owners' meetings by dropping the "I've asked for a trade" tweet. I mean, it's really a war between the two of them right now, and the only thing that can save them is Jim Irsay, Arthur Blank. I mean, you name these guys, and then after the draft, what might happen? The Ravens are going to draft a quarterback. I don't think there's any question about that. Now, whether it's Stetson Bennett or whoever it would be that's not in that top tier, but they're preparing for life after Lamar. It's always, I mean, Baker Mayfield said that they cornered him, right? And they tried to spend $30 million on Darius Slay to play cornerback. So they were a little more quietly active behind closed doors in regard to what his cap number represents for them to have to cut football players. They couldn't re-sign Calais Campbell. They can't re-sign Marcus Peters right now because of his cap number. This is not a team. Steve Bisciotti did not become a billionaire, and Harbaugh and DaCosta did not gain their arrogance and this level of respect that you have for them out of town by allowing their quarterback to hold the franchise hostage. Like, seriously. And that's kind of where this has been for quite some time now. And I can't imagine that the franchise is going to sign up for 6 more months of this leading up to the first week of football.
Lamar sending out poop emojis. We're trying to get our daughter not to say the word poop right now, so I guess I can empathize with the Ravens organization a little bit on that front. All right, Nestor, last one from me. Week 1, Lamar Jackson is under center for the Baltimore Ravens, or are you taking the field? He's somewhere else.
I did opening day at the local casino here, and, it's all new, betting, gambling. I'm not a betting guy. Anyone who's listening to me knows that. But I actually went up to the window and said, can I bet on this? I really, because it's worth betting on. I can't fathom the Ravens are going to sign on for more than this. I can't fathom that Lamar comes back with his tail between his legs and says, okay, I'll just take $130 million guaranteed.
Would he play on the franchise tag?
Man, I can't imagine he will. I thought it was bad business for him to do it last year. When you add his money next to Josh Allen's money, he's made almost $100 million less than a guy drafted in the class, and he's the MVP because he's done a poor job of negotiating for himself. He played for $25 million less than he should have last year. I mean, he's already way upside down, and maybe nobody wants him, right? I mean, I think he could hold out. And I think he might not play, and I think the Players Association may be baking up something that's litigation-oriented. I mean, we're not – the sad part, it's Lamarathon, but we're not at the end of this. I mean, I don't think anything's going to happen quickly because Jimmy Irsay didn't bite, right? You guys are on the phone with me because of that. So nobody's biting on this, so they're kind of stuck with him, and he's stuck with them. And I think that's not good for either one of them, but certainly it's not – comfortable territory for the Ravens organization going into a season, feeling like who's our quarterback.
Nestor, final minute here. I've got to ask. I mean, during the 2012 Super Bowl on Radio Row, I thought I wouldn't say that you were the star of Radio Row, but your little Bob Irsay doll was. You had a small, kind of cute little doll of Bob Irsay that you, the late Bob Irsay, the owner of the Baltimore Colts, then the Indianapolis Colts, that you. I think you took him around to different landmarks in town and took
Dude,
photos.
I have pictures of him with Don Shula and stuff. It's awesome. Yeah.
So do you still have the little doll?
I had it until last year. I do business with a place called Nacho Mama's here. You can go to a couple locations. There's a Nacho Mama's in Towson that, and Scunny was the founder who passed away about 10 years ago. He's an old friend of mine, old Baltimore Ocean City guy who collected stolen Memorial Stadium stuff and Natty Bo stuff and Elvis stuff. It's kind of a kitschy place. And I donated it to them. Little Bob is at the bar in Towson. Big Bob. There's an original Bob. Mike Rosigliano is the artist who made them. He was the longtime Baltimore Sun sports cartoonist and dear friend of mine. He made a paper mache version of Bob back in 84, 85. Its face got punched in at Schaefer's Bar. It was gifted back to me when the franchise came, and I brought its head on a stick into your square and took it to Circle Center back in 96 when Jim Harbaugh was your quarterback. So the original's in a casket at Nacho Mama's in Canton on the wall.
Oh, yeah. It's painted like a Mayflower truck, right?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The casket is painted like a Mayflower truck.
No, it's just a little black. It's not like that.
I'll bet you on that. It was when I was there, at least.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't been to Canton in a couple weeks.
And it's got a Don Schaefer quote on the side that says, "He lied and died." So, no hard
correct.
feelings.
That's correct. You should see what they did to Art in Cleveland, dude. But if you want to see the Beanie Bob, it's at the back bar at Nacho Mama's. And it's real cute, and it has dollar bills coming out of it, and, it's all good.
Beautiful. Nestor, I
great stuff, Nestor.
Of the three of us here, I'm the one that took the Orioles to win more games than the Diamondbacks or the A's, and I got a 6-pack of PBR riding on it. So go, cute fella, go Birds.
Bad things have happened to the Birds to start the season here, but, we have the best player in the world, Adley Rutschman. Just ask anyone.
All right.
Nestor, love the energy. Thank you.
Appreciate you guys. Have a great week.
He brought it, Jake.
Nestor's great, man. Nasty Nestor, baby.
A lot of Colts.
I'm telling you, the side of the casket is painted like the Mayflower truck.
A lot of Colts fans listening to that and saying, yeah, I would continue to wave the yellow flag, potentially red flag.
There's really good
at
insight
a pursuit of Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson, I think.
And again, I just cannot get over, Jake, December, January, the last 2 years, 12 games for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson's missed the last 10.
Yeah.
December, January, most important parts of the season, the wear and tear of a season. And then again, I think there's just a little bit, I don't know if it's fair or unfair. Nestor, alluded to some of it. I think there's a little bit more just off the field that if you're going to make that type of financial draft pick commitment, boy, you want to make sure you're getting some staying power, not only on the field, but off the field. And that appears to be some questions on that front. All right, 9 o'clock hour coming up. Kevin and Query here, 93.5 The Fan. Jake, I think you've said this quite often regarding Lamar Jackson or just regarding the Colts in general, that they're not a quarterback away. And I think that would be one of the bigger questions I would have about acquiring a Lamar Jackson type is, again, how are you taking care of the other needs? Because I think there are other needs, both sides of the ball, short-term and long-term. And giving up 2 first-round picks, you already see the frugal nature to Chris Ballard. When he has cap space, he wouldn't have it moving forward with Lamar. That would be a major question. I think Jim Irsay accurately pointed that out at the owners' meetings last week, in that the best time to build a roster is when your quarterback is on a rookie contract.
I think Nestor pointed out some really good things, really interesting things, I should say, just about Lamar Jackson and kind of the drama of him.
There is a little bit more drama, and I'm glad that it was a great idea to get the Baltimore perspective on it. For those that missed it, Nestor, Aparicio we just had on, radio voice in Baltimore, long time. There's just a lot there. Quarterback is such a desperate position. The fact that the NFL is totally silent, it seems like, on the Lamar Jackson situation, there's a lot that plays into it. And I think you are seeing that. I did have to laugh at this one from Dan. Dan goes, Chris Ballard should run the Pirates or Orioles. That way no one cares that he puts fiscal responsibility over winning.
I mean, it's starting to feel that way, isn't it? I'm not saying that's the case. I mean, obviously he wants to win, but he is fiscally conservative.
How much of that is owner-driven? Also
a good question. I don't think it's owner-driven because I think Jim Irsay is willing to spend money, Kevin. The problem is he is still paying for areas where he wanted to set a message or be loyal by paying money in the wrong spots. You know what I mean? Like he's not afraid. Obviously, he's not afraid to open his pocketbook, to give a bonus to a retiring quarterback, or to get a ring for a running back that doesn't play here anymore. That kind of thing. I think the Colts are probably, when you heard Nestor talking about just kind of the sideshow of Lamar Jackson and some of the challenges with Lamar Jackson, some franchises maybe, and may rightly, because he's a tremendous talent, some franchises may say that's worth it to us. But if you are a franchise like the Indianapolis Colts that is still PTSD'd over a quarterback retiring 2 weeks before the season began, then you probably have a different perspective on it.
Well, I think that's part of it, Jake, and I also think that, and again, right or wrong, I just want to kind of explain what I think Chris Ballard's point of view is. When Ballard says, Ballard has an incredibly high standard for drafting a player in the top 10, for trading up, potentially to number 3, to number 1, et cetera, for that player. To give up 2 first-round picks and maybe a fully guaranteed contract, like that means a whole lot to Chris Ballard, and he has a trickle-down effect. That means a whole lot to the locker room. So you better be right. You better be right on the field. You better be right off the field for that. I did see Todd McShay just had his latest mock draft. Interesting.
When you say interesting, he has the Colts selecting 4th. Is that correct?
He's got the Colts selecting 3rd.
Okay, now hang on. 3rd.
Mm-hmm. A trade up from Todd McShay. He begins as this. I've heard mixed messages regarding the Colts' interest in quarterbacks not named Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, but the veteran route just hasn't worked for them. They've started each of the past 5 seasons with a different starting QB, and they scored the NFL's fewest points last year. If either Anthony Richardson or Kentucky's Will Levis is Indy's guy, it can't afford to stay at number 4 and just hope things work out. Boy, I could not agree more with that last sentence. He's got them trading up for Richardson. Trading up 1 spot for Anthony Richardson.
He said it would cost the 4th pick, and then he says somewhere in the ballpark of a 3rd rounder, like number 79, and a future 2nd rounder along the way.
Yeah, which, again, when you look at it like that, I mean, that's a big price.
And for Arizona, it works out because they move 1 spot down. They can still get Will Anderson if they want.
What's more interesting is that would slide, according to Todd McShay, that puts Levis at 14.
I think the other interesting to point out there, remember late last week when you saw in Vegas the odds really change about Tennessee taking a QB? And there was a lot of chatter about Tennessee trading up to number 3.
Right.
If you look at Arizona's new general manager, he comes from Tennessee. Now, Tennessee has a new general manager that came from San Francisco, so there's not necessarily an overlap with those two voices, but obviously the Arizona GM would have some familiarity with Mike Vrabel and those still within the Titans organization. So part of me has kind of looked at that two ways. One, there's a connection there, but two, how much of that could be a smokescreen? And Arizona saying to Tennessee, hey, let's just float you out there, and hopefully that drives up the asking price for Indianapolis to trade up to 3. Like, this is what all this time of year is about. All these hypotheticals, line season, smokescreen, all of it.
Richardson, to me, my hesitation with Richardson, I'm always hesitant with any player, be it NBA or NFL, but notably NFL, and then when you're talking NFL, at quarterback. I'm always hesitant of any player whose stock, value, and intrigue all increase once they're no longer on the field.
Yeah, everything has been shorts and a T-shirt. Praise for Anthony Richardson.
Correct. And that to me, I've...
Especially at quarterback.
I've seen this movie, right?
And again, especially at quarterback, Jake. Like, it's one thing for a DN to light up the combine from a testing standpoint and you just say, hey, those athletic traits, you just never fully saw them on display. When, like, athletically, what he does from a testing standpoint, you would see play in and play out. Whereas a quarterback, Anthony Richardson's not going to run every play.
Right.
Like 54%. How worrisome is that to people?
Yeah, I mean...
54%. And, Jake, you watch a lot of college football. Let's be honest, there's a lot of throws that don't go past the line of scrimmage in college football.
Correct. Yeah, a lot of bubble screens.
A lot of bubble screens, a lot of zone read, and I know Richardson certainly has some moments down the field, but Will Levis 64%, Anthony Richardson 54%. I know it doesn't boil down to one stat necessarily, but boy, accuracy, to me, that's hard to teach.
Jamarcus Ellis.
Russell.
Or Jamarcus Russell, I mean, yeah. Jamarcus Russell, I mean, Heath Schuler was another guy that I remember. Heath Schuler coming out of Tennessee. It was like he was a big body with a big arm, and man, he was impressive. Leland McElroy at the combine. Whoa, what this guy? He got a standing ovation during his workouts.
Any relation to Rory McIlroy?
No, played for the Colts briefly. Yeah, Jamarcus Ellis, by the way, was one of that played basketball under Kelvin Sampson, right? Also,
I would say some off the field, off the court.
Yeah,
stuff.
I was going to say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Richardson, sure, I get the intrigue, I do. But at any point, how many times this year, and I did hear a little bit. I mean, to be fair, I did hear a little bit. But Kevin, you're right. I watch a lot of college football, and I'm during the course of the year. How often did you hear? You got to see. Have you heard about this quarterback at Florida? Have you seen this guy at Florida?
He had a really good start. It was at the Utah game. I think he played particularly well, and then it kind of tapered off from there. Which is another thing. I know he had some really good moments against ranked teams, but it kind of tapered off after that. Yeah, Utah, he was a 70% passer.
2,549 yards through the air, 54% completion. 7.8 average was the average yards per completion. 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Running the ball, 103 carries for 654 yards.
Very dynamic.
And 9 touchdowns.
The LSU game stands out more than any from a running standpoint.
Okay, now let me read you real quick one thing. Okay? If you look at Florida's schedule from last season, we're just going to pick one game totally randomly. Utah, Kentucky, South Florida, Tennessee, Eastern Washington, Missouri, LSU, Georgia, Texas A&M, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Florida State. Which game do you want me to pick? Oregon State in the bowl game.
Go with Georgia.
He didn't play, I don't think.
Didn't play in the Georgia game?
No, the bowl game. Georgia, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Against Georgia, which is a pretty good. I mean, you're seeing some guys that are going to play on Sunday, right?
Well, look what C.J. Stroud did against Georgia.
In that game, Anthony Richardson, 18 of 37 for 271 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks. 11 carries, 19 yards. Okay.
Do you look at 13 games of experience as optimistically or negatively?
Negatively.
So you don't look at it as
because
he's got so much potential and room to grow. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I get it. Mitchell Trubisky had 13 games experience, right? Oh, but like his mechanics are great. He looks great in the combine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the danger. That's the thing I'd be worried about.
Kevin, want to talk a little Hendon Hooker. Kevin, good morning.
Morning.
You want to talk Hooker?
Yeah, I was just wondering why you guys aren't talking about him at all, because his stats beat everybody's stats you're talking about right now.
Yeah, I think more so than the injury and age question with him, it's a college system question. And Matt Miller, I thought the ESPN draft analyst we had on yesterday, I thought he hit on this pretty well and didn't get overly technical with it. Basically, Tennessee runs a very kind of Baylor-like offense where they utilize the hash marks that are much different than where they are at in the NFL, and basically you're only reading kind of like half the field at a time. And again, I don't want to get too like crazy in depth, but I think projecting guys, in particular quarterbacks, out of that system is a big question mark.
I also think with Hendon Hooker,
it's a bit gimmicky. And again, I know a lot of people say, well, why can't you just adapt the college system to the pro system? We've heard Shane Steichen say that a lot. Again, from a hash mark standpoint, the rules in the field is just different.
I also think with Hendon Hooker, the thought process would be, okay, you slide back and you take him later, and then you still get a good piece at 4. He's coming off the injury, which plenty of guys have come back from knee injuries, don't get me wrong. I agree that he's a very good player, had a very good year. There's a lot to like about him, and I absolutely think and hope that he can be a good player in the NFL. He is a little bit older. I don't see that as the detriment that some do. But I think it becomes a challenge of running that risk. If you pass on a quarterback at 4 and you take a defensive player or a lineman or whatever it may be with the hopes that you can slide back and in the late first or early second get Hendon Hooker, the challenge there is I think there are other teams that are thinking the exact same thing. I think people are calling into radio shows in Seattle asking about Hendon Hooker. I think people are calling into radio shows in Tampa asking about Hendon Hooker. I think people are calling into radio shows in New Orleans asking about Hendon Hooker. I think people are calling into radio shows in
Nashville
talking about Hendon Hooker. Absolutely. So I do think that you're kind of playing with fire there.
Patrick wanted me to do the random game with Will Levis.
Oh, okay.
I think the thing with Levis you have to mention, and I talked about this last week, speaking with an NFL scout, and basically said, with Levis, you've got to be very open-minded to what he did as a junior. What he did in his junior year, there was some Matthew Stafford in that season, and then his senior year. And again, it's difficult with Levis because you quickly have to make excuses for him, and you've got to decide if those excuses are valid or not. Basically, in his senior year, everything crippled around him.
Okay.
And physically, he was banged up as well.
Will Levis, you want to do his senior year? Or you want to
sure.
Do okay. Here's the schedule: Miami, Florida, Youngstown State, Northern Illinois, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Missouri, Vanderbilt, Georgia, Louisville.
Let's go with the Fighting Chris Higgins.
Well, which is that? There's like 6 of these.
Be more specific.
Mississippi State.
Okay. Against Mississippi State, Will Levis. Here we go. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Sorry.
False alarm.
Yeah, I screwed that up. I clicked the wrong thing here. In the game against Mississippi State, that game was, I believe, at Mississippi State.
Oh, hostile environment with Chris Hagan shirt off in the front row with the
Will
cowboy.
Levis was 17 of 23 for 230 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He carried the ball 4 times for 7 yards. Quarterback rating of 91.7.
Give me the one against Northern Illinois.
Northern Illinois?
Is that what you said, or you said Illinois? Who'd you say?
No, Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
That game intrigues you?
Yeah.
No, the Huskies, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Huskies won last
the
night.
Huskies.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay. Northern Illinois, Will Levis, 18 of 26 for 303 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He ran the ball 9 times so he was sacked 9 times.
Sacked 9 times?
Well, he had 9 carries for negative 10 yards. So, probably 7 of those were sacks, I would think, right?
It's funny, debating these two, because with Levis, the junior year is better than the senior year. And with Richardson, it's just the 1 year. So, how do you, if there was more Richardson, would it be more good, or would it be 54% again?
Look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen, as a junior at Wyoming, had a really good year. And then his senior year, people are like, his numbers dropped. He didn't throw as many touchdowns. It's like, 3 of his receivers left. They graduated. And he was throwing to guys he'd never thrown to before. You have to factor that in.
And I think Pat points this out. I think it's a really fair statement. The pass that Anthony Richardson gets for having a bad team around him versus the non-pass that Will Levis gets for having a bad team around him is mind-boggling. I think outside of the talent around the two, it was what Will Levis had in place his junior year versus what he didn't have in place his senior year. The offensive coordinator change, his own health. I think those are a couple things you have to acknowledge. Now, again, with Richardson, if he would have had a second year, do you see second year growth out of him? Being in the system, some continuity from playing time, those sorts of things. Those sorts of debates you have to have. And there's no easy answer. If there was, we obviously would be talking about these guys probably, 1 or 2, whereas Matt Miller, who we had on yesterday from ESPN, talks about them more in the 20s. Jake, your favorite tournament memory will be what from this year?
I got to look at my favorite tournament memory. Obviously we're going just strictly with.
Does it have to be favorite or just the most memorable?
Yeah, I guess let's just go most memorable.
Most memorable would have to be Purdue getting ousted.
Will this be like the Fairleigh Dickinson tournament?
That's what's interesting about this tournament.
I think it could be the Florida Atlantic tournament.
It could just be the all the number 1s got bounced
and
relatively early.
And 2s and 3s.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I think this tournament is going to be like I'm trying to think of a Super Bowl year. Give me a Super Bowl year where just some random team, like one of those Ravens years, like Ravens Giants, where you're like,
Dilfer quarterbacking them.
Yeah,
here comes Kerry Collins.
It doesn't feel like there's much of this tournament that people are really going to remember. Florida Atlantic, sure, but did they remember George Mason getting into the Final Four? My favorite, honestly, watching San Diego State knock out Alabama in a bar with one poor guy that was a San Diego State fan whose life was being made by it and everybody kind of enjoying it with him. But Alabama, I thought, was really good. And that was when I was like, wow, San Diego State actually is pretty good. Fairleigh Dickinson, the way that watching it unfold against Purdue is probably the thing that will jump out.
Think about the ending San Diego State had. Obviously, they beat Alabama in the Sweet 16. Then think about the ending they had in the Elite Eight against Creighton on the foul call. And then, obviously, the ending on Saturday night with Florida Atlantic. That to me is like the back-to-back 1-point wins is like 6th or 7th most memorable thing from this tournament for me. And yet I probably should have it higher on the list because
I think
I thought, how about the Furman, Virginia finish?
Yeah.
Going back to that opener, because that was, I think, the first session of the first day, if I'm not mistaken. You had the Virginia kid, and you can't talk about it without Purdue fans just thinking back and wanted to bang their head against the wall. But Kie Clark for Virginia, who made the incredible pass, had just such a knack for not rushing things and throwing the ball up to the Diakite guy who forced the game into overtime against Purdue in the Elite Eight. That was Kie Clark as a freshman. Then there he is as a fifth-year senior, and he makes one of the dumbest plays you'll see in NCAA tournament history with that pass ahead. Chaotic moment, boom, Furman hits the three. The guy had missed, 15 straight threes until he makes that one. Kevin Harlan goes nuts. Like, that moment, is one shiny moment definitely showed last night, and
I think
probably one that should be pretty high on the list.
I think the thing that's interesting is this. We talk a lot about the portal. We talk a lot about NIL. We talk a lot about the COVID year, the fifth year, and that the stage is set for upheaval in college basketball and a realignment of the powers that be. And yet, in the year that is supposed to be the most representative of that because of San Diego State and Miami and Florida Atlantic and Creighton, and Kansas State making these runs with transfers and NILs and everything else. It's the team that, in the program that, for the last quarter century, has been the most consistently competitive in college basketball that won it. You know, Connecticut won their 5th national championship in 24 years. That is among schools that have won at least 5 championships. That's the second fastest 1 through 5 in history, behind only UCLA. It ties Duke. It puts them on a faster trajectory to 5 than North Carolina, Indiana, Kentucky. And for all of the blue bloods that were not part of the party, Kentucky getting bounced by Kansas State, UCLA getting bounced by Gonzaga. Gonzaga, you could say, is kind of a blue blood now as well, I guess. You know, Indiana getting bounced by Miami, Kansas getting bounced by Arkansas. It was Connecticut who literally is, Kevin, Connecticut's like the COVID year of blue blood programs. They're the anomaly. They're the outlier because do you know anybody that's a diehard Connecticut fan? Do you see any Carmel Pups kids that are wearing Connecticut shorts?
Can't say that. Although they did have good East Bay shorts back in the day, but yeah.
You know, you don't when you get on an airplane, you see a guy wearing a full Texas suit or a Kentucky hat or a Kansas pullover. You don't ever see anybody wearing Connecticut stuff.
I also think the thing about Connecticut, Jake, is like their involvement. Like, you know, with Calhoun, I think they were known as just like a bunch of bullies. You know, they just, you know, the Beat and Rudy, Jeff Adrian, and just some of these big guys, Emeka Okafor, like really good big men. And then Kemba Walker gets them on that magical run. Shabazz Napier gets them on a run. I mean, you had those moments where their guard play, and then honestly, you watch them through this tournament, and Sanogo's a great big guy, but boy, just such a combination of skill around him. Let's get to one more caller, getting back into the Colts draft debate. Ryan, we're going to talk about Anthony Richardson. Morning, Ryan.
Good morning. I was just calling to see how much stock you're putting into Richardson fitting Steichen's offensive system really well. Just seeing what Jalen Hurts could do, MVP type season. Maybe Richardson fits that offense maybe a little bit more than anybody else in the draft.
It's a great question. It's a great question, and I would probably go here first with that, Jake, and almost ask Ryan, like, what is Shane Steichen's system? You know, is it the Jalen Hurts? Is that the ideal quarterback that he wants? Or is it more of the Herbert?
Right.
Or is it more of the Rivers? Again, what has staying power in this league? And that's the beauty and the mystery of Steichen. The beauty is he's done it with different shapes, sizes, styles. The mystery is we don't really know. If you listen to him, the physical trait I think he mentions the most is accuracy. But the trait he mentions more than anything else, it's the it factor. How are you between the ears? So, yes, I think there would be appeal from a running quarterback, certainly. But more than anything, I think it's neck up.
Listen, I'm just going to stand by what I've been saying. I still, until I hear different, I'm going to say it's Levis.
Should we do, I was thinking, I'd be fine with it. You think we should do a little mayo in the coffee here coming up to get ready for
Levis?
Levis?
Jake for that. No. Jake should do that.
No, not going to happen.
You got out of the St. Elmo cocktail?
I'm not a big mayo person at all.
I drink coffee every day. If you want me to do it, I'll do it.
Yeah, I think I'll do it.
Mayonnaise is terrible. Now, he's backed off that.
Now, what mayo does he use, though?
Did he back off that?
I mean,
yeah, I thought he backed off of it and was like, listen.
He just said he eats a banana straight anyways. Wasn't that his other thing? He doesn't peel it?
He said we're talking about, for those unfamiliar, Will Levis there was kind of a thing that went around about how he puts mayonnaise in his coffee, and there was even, I think, at one point it showed him, I think it was Hellman's, putting it into his coffee and mixing it. He has since said that he and his girlfriend one morning, they realized that they were out of cream. And so, like,
boy, where are you going with this here?
No, seriously. They realized, like, we're out of our cream, or, whatever creamer they use. They were out of it, and he's like, well, I can't drink black coffee. And so, as a joke, he put the mayonnaise in it. That's supposedly.
God, boy, that was dangerous.
listen, I am
You're
very
worried about Nestor.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Let me tell you.
Jake in the 9 o'clock hour is pretty much Nestor.
Let me tell you guys something here, okay?
Worried about Cream. Well, him and his girlfriend, they were out of Mayo.
Let's clear this air now, okay? Of the three of us, I'm clearly the more professionally mature.
I don't know about that.
And as a result of that...
Yeah, I didn't have my credential. You guys let me in.
You should absolutely trust me. I'm not going to lead you astray. You know, the innuendos and the fun little games and jokes, I've been there, done that, gotten the T-shirts, gave most away, okay? Mm-hmm. What you're looking at here is nothing more than straight-laced, professional, dialed-in, on-point broadcast excellence.
It's the same guy that was like, hey, can you guys look at my back scar real quick? Is it need to get bandaged up again?
I forgot about that. How did you remember that? See,
it's burnt into my brain.
Well, the things that you recall. What I'd like to do is I like to share, Mark, because of this broadcast excellence of which I speak, I think it is important for the two of you as my coworkers for me to be able to share each and every, and the very few physical flaws that I have, I want you to be able to see them and experience them as part of the totality of what you have the pleasure of experiencing each and every morning.
So I just wait. He's just like me, that Jay Query.
Yep, just
he's the everyman.
Yeah. Humility defined.
I put my back ointment on with one odd wraparound.
No,
like
you asked
else.
Kevin and I to do it. Someone reach back here. I'm having trouble.
I'm just saying to you.
Evan points out he thinks the coaching change at Florida screwed up some of Anthony Richardson's development. Yeah, I think it's a good point to know. Dan Mullen did have a track record of developing QBs, I would say, pretty well. How that would have changed. And, again, all these debates, this is what makes the decision so difficult and why there's, such a hit rate and such a miss rate when it comes to – you can't have 32 perfect quarterbacks in the NFL. It's just not how competition.
Dave Calabro says he's calling BS on this. Now, I don't...
I'm right there with Dave.
I couldn't agree more with
Excuse me?
You know my dad taught Dave at Ben Davis?
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What subject?
PE and health for my father.
Well, Dave seems healthy. I don't know how physical he is.
A little bit of shop class as well.
You think he could do pull-ups? I couldn't do pull-ups.
What was it called? Presidential fitness?
Yeah, that's right.
Boy, I really struggled with flexibility.
I was not strong. Now, do they still do the rope?
I'm going to guess no.
The gym still have the rope?
Do they even have gym class? Do they all just wear hazmat suits in gym class and just run into each other?
Like that. In hindsight, I will say the rope. Like it seems like it's been a while since OSHA's gone out and checked that. Right? Like you get 3/4 away, and there's supposed to be one guy at the bottom that's supposed to hold the rope for you, and then that's who you land on if you fall. That's how Jerry and George been on Seinfeld. By the way,
doesn't seem like enough waivers to sign off on.
Jeremy, I'm coming down. I hit the bell.
No, it's not a bell. It's a wooden disc.
We had a bell in my school.
It was a wooden disc. Desmond McGee actually stole Dave Marin's hat and put it on top of the wooden disc and then told him to go get it. It was a little bit uncomfortable.
Pop quiz in a few. I would say it's pretty manageable. Taking a gander at it right now. So give us a call, 317-239-1070. Jiffy Lube oil change up for grabs. Until then, let's do a morning checkdown.
Sounds like you're saying Scotty lost his fastball with these pop quizzes.
The morning checkdown. Omaha! On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Not much to talk about in the NBA because last night they decided to take the night off to watch Connecticut and San Diego State. The Pacers get back in action tomorrow night against the New York Knicks. But speaking of that Connecticut-San Diego State game, Kevin went pretty much as expected.
Yeah, early lead for UConn. They were in full control throughout the first half, 12-point lead at half. They stayed that way till probably about the midway point of the second half, and San Diego State made a big run. They cut it down to 5. A Jordan Hawkins 3, though, with 5 minutes to go, started a 9-0 UConn run. That put the game on ice 76-59 for Danny Hurley. It's his first national title, and obviously a pretty cool moment there late for Danny Hurley, watching his son dribble out the clock and celebrating one of the more dominant runs we've seen in tournament history. Here was Danny Hurley afterwards on UConn, cutting down the net.
I just think it's such a hard tournament to be successful in and navigate, and obviously we the last two teams we've played, I mean, Miami, beating Houston and Texas back-to-back in Kansas City, I mean, that's a heck of a team. We played Alabama. We know how good they are. I mean, these guys, beating them and a Creighton team that this tournament's hard to navigate. It's not 7-game series. It's not 5-game series. And now with the extra COVID year and NIL and the portal, it's like I think it's made things even more challenging for the biggest brands and the highest seeds to advance because there's so much parity.
On the Big East note, Jake, did you see Butler, another name in the transfer portal yesterday? Simas Lukosius. That brings their top 5 leading scorers from last season, either all in the portal or, in Manny Bates' case, going pro.
Yeah, they're going to have some. Thad Matta's got some work to do, right? You know
Work
what I noticed
would be an
too?
Understatement.
2 things there with Danny Hurley's comments. Number one,
tournament.
That's it. People on the East Coast say tournament, and I've always laughed at that, but it actually makes sense, and it actually is correct. I've always said tournament. But think about it. Like TOUR is tour, right? Mm-hmm. So it's tournament. Also, because I've noticed this with Bob Kravitz, who also grew up on the East Coast on Long Island. If you're from the East Coast, Danny Hurley from Jersey City, New Jersey, do you not pronounce the H in Houston?
Houston? Yeah, I always hear that too.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah, he does do that. Was he any good as a player?
Danny Hurley?
Yeah, was it Seton Hall? Is that right?
I think he was okay, right? I mean, he wasn't Bobby Hurley, but I think he was okay.
Yeah. Where was it? Was it Wagner, Rhode Island before UConn?
He was definitely at Rhode Island because I went to a Butler game and saw him coaching there. Did a good job.
Yeah, it seems like they take the H and the O out of Houston. So it's Houston.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
You know, Rhode Island apparently is a huge party school. URI is what they call it. And I guess the people that go there call it UR High. That's like it's a big party school.
Tough first year, right, for Archie Miller there?
Yeah, he did not do well.
They also say golf. So you got to go play golf later.
Couple Fs, just not just one F on that.
Yeah.
MLB from yesterday, the Reds beat the Cubs. Very high-scoring opening inning in that one. 7-6. Tucker Barnhart's return to Cincinnati included the start, and he got a hit in that one. By the way, for those looking for something to pass the time today, scroll through Joey Votto's Twitter from last night. He's on a rehab assignment in Louisville, was watching the Reds game from the couch, and just decided to answer fan questions on Twitter. It was great.
He seems like a cool dude.
He just gets it.
Remember when they had it mic'd up?
Remember when he walked through the stands last year during one game in September?
Yeah.
Like just surprising people in the stands? I mean, if you were showing up at a Reds game in September, you probably deserve that.
True.
Last season.
Scotty Johnson just walked in. He's wearing his Reds hat.
Scotty, if the playoffs started today, the Reds would host. They'd win the pennant. Tigers beat the Astros 7-6. Guardians over the A's. It's a 4-1 start for the Fighting Scotty Hunts. The Cardinals lose to the Braves 8-4. White Sox drubbed by the Giants 12-3. And Jake, your team was a winner, right? Cute fella?
Cute fella, baby. The Orioles. Only of our 3 yesterday to win. I didn't see the Diamondbacks and the Athletics getting it done.
I mean, the A's, no issue scoring. Just couldn't stop anybody. 12-11 against the Guardians. All right, it is time for the pop quiz. Give us a call, 317-239-1070.
Studied? Can you handle the pressure? Sharpen your pencils. It's time for the Pop Quiz with Kevin and Query. Brought to you by Jiffy Lube, Indiana's favorite oil change since 1985.
Even Scotty shrugged the shoulders and said, yeah, it's kind of doable. 4 or 5, probably providing some challenges here, but college basketball knowledge will come in handy for the first 3.
Totally agree with that. Number 1's a little tricky, I think, but
really?
Well, you had to stay up late.
Yeah, but I'll just give a big hint. We'll just move on.
And turn into Jay Query all of a sudden?
We're talking into reality. It's late in the school year. Gosh, I thought it was supposed to be sunny earlier today. Does sound like tonight going to get a little dicey here weather-wise. So
looks a bit stormy.
Hopefully nothing too crazy on that front with what we had this weekend. All right, Jake, number 1 through 8.
I will go with last night Connecticut won their 5th national championship, so we'll go with number 5.
5 for the Huskies of UConn.
Hang out with Tim. Tim, what's up?
Tim.
Good morning, fellas.
Tim, good morning to you.
Tim, you called the program a couple weeks ago, right?
I did, yes.
You're retired, is that right?
That's correct.
And you were in the transportation business?
That's right. Very good.
And Tim, if you don't mind me asking, you're native to where? Did you grow up in Central Indiana?
I grew up in Newcastle.
Oh, and did we discuss this already?
We did.
Have you ever stayed at the Steve Alford Inn?
I have not.
Has it ever crossed your mind?
Not once.
You graduated from Newcastle High School in what year?
74.
Okay, so Phil Cox was Connorsville, though, right?
Phil Cox was in Connorsville.
Yeah. Benson would have been...
was a year older than me.
Benson was a year older than you. Yeah, that's right. And so now for Kent Benson, as a classmate, you liked him because he was a great basketball player, or you didn't like him because he was bratty?
Well, I didn't like him because we went to grade school together, and he beat me up on the playground one time.
You and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right?
Exactly.
Kareem actually got your payback for you.
He did.
Tim, who's the greatest Newcastle basketball player not named Benson or Alford?
Well, in my opinion, it was a guy named David Snodgrass. He was a year older than Benson, and that was the best team Newcastle ever had in '72, and they got beat by Bruce Parkinson and Yorktown in the regional.
Where did he play?
I think he ended up going to Northern Michigan or something. I mean, he was a great high school player, but 6'1", guard, couldn't guard a wall, as our high school coach would say. So
now, Tim, with Kent Benson,
say about me.
What was the origin of the fight on the playground with Kent Benson when you were a kid?
I think I accused him of cheating in a kickball game or something.
Did he?
Yeah. Crossed home plate too early.
Of course he did. I was half his size, and he just beat the crap out of me because he could.
And what was the size differential, Tim? Not to get too personal, but I don't see that ending well for you.
It was probably at least a foot.
Gee, come on. Pick on someone your own size, Kent.
Exactly.
Daughter was a hell of a volleyball player back.
This is Tim, who's the president of the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar fan club.
That's right. That's right.
Tim, appreciate
First game in the league. I'm sorry.
Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you calling in. Jake, you want to lead off?
All right, Tim. Oh, you're going to give me this one here? Tim, UConn, the national champion last night, but who was named most outstanding player of the Final Four? Do you want multiple choice here?
It was Sanogo.
No hint needed from Tim there. Big guys mean a lot to Tim.
That's right.
He
That's right.
Closes there. Yeah. Name the last Big East school, Tim, to win the NCAA men's basketball tournament. This obviously would be before UConn.
You better give me multiple choice on that one.
Boy, Scotty says no multiple choice.
Their retired coach hopes you know the right answer.
Were they Big East at the time or Big East now?
Yeah, they were Big East at the time. They've won a couple of them here in the last decade. They've been arguably the most consistent basketball program, really, in college basketball probably for the last decade, besides this past year.
They pulled off a major upset when you were about 30 years old.
Wow. Let's go with Syracuse.
Big East, Butler's beat them at Hinkle in some great games here over the last handful of years.
You said Big East then in there. Okay.
Older women think their coach was hot.
Villanova.
All right, question number
That was the
3.
hint that put him over the top.
Tim, no more caring for you on the playground anymore. It's you against Kent the rest of the way.
Believe it or not, UConn with the 5th title last night, Tim. That means that they have now won a title in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. Name the only other school to win an NCAA men's basketball tournament in 4 consecutive decades. Was it Duke, UCLA, North Carolina, or Indiana?
70s, 80s. It would be, let's see, UCLA.
Okay.
That 05 team was so dominant. Beat Michigan State, I remember in that one. All right, number 4 here, Tim. The Rangers lost last night, leaving 2 unbeaten teams in Major League Baseball in the Rays and the Twins. 3 National League teams are 3-1. Which of the following NL teams has lost more than 1 game? Is it A, the Reds? And it's not. The Reds are 3-1. Great start for the Reds. B, the Brewers. C, the Braves. D, the Dodgers.
Let's go with the Braves.
All right, last question for you here, Tim. On this day in 1974, Hank Aaron hit career home run 714, which tied him for Babe Ruth for the all-time Major League lead. In what stadium that I would bet significant money was the first one where you ever saw a Major League Baseball game? Did he hit the home run?
Stadium, and I was there.
Hold on, you were there when he hit it?
Wow.
I was there, yes.
Tell us more, Tim.
Well, my dad took me to the very first game in Riverfront Stadium, and I was, how old would I have been? This would have been 72, correct?
Yeah, so you'd have been 17?
14, basically.
Okay.
16, yeah. And I remember walking into that stadium and seeing the cutouts around the base paths, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Now,
and then, went back and saw the hammer.
I'll tell you awesome. What, you have a missed question on this quiz.
Okay.
And I'm going to play. It's been a while since we've had a winner on this.
He's got a couple misses, not just to clarify.
I'm willing to wipe the slate clean since you were there, Tim, if you can tell me the starting pitcher that Hank Aaron hit the home run off of.
Let's see. Let's go with Jack Billingham.
Ring it up. Ring it up for Tim.
Tim, take that, Kent Benson. Let's go.
Uh-huh. Yeah, who's Big Red now, right?
Exactly.
Hell yeah.
That was one kick you know where. Benson's on the ground crying for Mrs. Jones to come over and help him up.
Heck yeah.
How about that?
Love it.
Jack Billingham. I'm thinking Pat Dillingham, former Notre Dame walk-on quarterback there. Tim, great stuff, man. Stay on the line.
Hey, it was very fun, guys. Thanks a lot.
That's Tim from Newcastle right there pulling out. I wouldn't even say outside of left field. He just knew that.
That was solid, man.
That was very
Scotty,
very
you got to
solid.
give him credit. He was actually at the site for game number 5 and backed it up by knowing who the pitcher was.
Scotty has that look where outside he's like, yeah, you guys are right. Inside he's like, I can't believe Jake did
that was impressive, man.
We'll close it out one final time here. Kevin and Corey.
That was an impressive poll by Tim there.
Very, very impressive by Tim. Gives me hopes for the Reds moving forward. So thank you for that, Tim. Speaking of baseball, to get anyone to agree universally on anything today speaks for itself. Have you guys heard anybody upset about the rule changes so far in Major League Baseball? Because I have not.
Not a one.
Yeah, probably a few pitchers.
If anything, I'm watching the game like, I can't believe this game's flying by
right.
to the degree it is.
Average time of 31 minutes shorter. 2 hours and 38 minutes opening week compared to 3 hours and 9 minutes from last season. Jeff Passan from ESPN had some great numbers on not only the, obviously a half hour shaved off there, but there's been like more action, more stolen bases. Obviously, the pickoffs have been restricted on that front. A little bit more small ball, a few more singles as well. And I would say one of the more surprising things has been the average of like violations, pitcher or batter, per game. It's been less than one per game. I thought they would take a little bit of getting used to for pitchers and batters, especially when you got into games that actually mattered.
Yeah, I mean, there's... you go to a baseball game, admittedly, when you're in attendance, I don't know that you notice it as much because you're kind of there just chatting and having a beer and just soaking in the ambiance. But when you watch on television, I mean, some of the delays. Now, the one area where it will be...
238, that's kind of sniffing an NBA game.
Correct.
NBA is probably 215,
so you know what
220.
you're getting into when you go to a game, right?
Yeah.
The one area where the only place where I can see the new rule being a drawback, and maybe I'm the only one here, there's something kind of magical about October.
I agreed.
And the drama of a late game and...
Yeah, playoff baseball, I said that a few weeks ago.
Showing people like huddling up, wearing their sweatshirts with their hands crossed, like hoping for the, cutting the tension while it's chilly in the air.
The long at bat, the pitcher
Correct.
pacing around the mound.
Correct. That's all part of the
changes
mystique.
Bats. Yeah. That's where, and again, that's probably nitpicking a little bit. But for a 162-game regular season, kudos to Major League Baseball for a sport that's probably lived in its pastime a little bit too much for offering some change.
Credit to Rob Manfred. He usually gets a lot of heat.
That's a great point, Mark.
He's that's a smart decision on his part.
It's a great point.
Was he part of that Manfred Man's Earth Band?
I don't know. Maybe is that what he did in a previous life? Check his LinkedIn. Maybe it's on there.
Seems like an interesting cat.
That LinkedIn, now that's just that's that Tinder for businesses, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got a
LinkedIn profile now I set up because you never know how long we'll do this job, and all I get now is emails from people asking me to link with them on LinkedIn. I guess that's the idea, right? On the LinkedIn, they want to
connect, right?
Huh?
Connect with them.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you link, right?
Yeah.
But I don't really know what that means.
Can't find out.
Is it just like? And then it says, "Do you
Are
want
you
people,
endorsing them? Are you endorsing them for PowerPoint?"
At one point, what's that?
You can endorse them for activities. They would endorse you for your math skills right now.
Really? Well, one of the things it says is, "Do you want businesses to know that you're looking for a job?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm really not." But I mean, if somebody came to me and said, "We want to offer you, $7.5 million to count cars as they pass on Meridian," sure, yeah, I'd probably be interested in that, but I'm not actively looking for a gig, right?
Is that job post on Craigslist or something?
That's on LinkedIn.
A bit seedy. I give you $7.5 million. You count these cars. Well, okay, where you want to meet me?
Right.
This is back alley.
You're all about that, right?
When you speak up and you say universally liked by all, probably spoke too soon. This from Kirk. I was at the Cardinals game on Sunday. I didn't like it. The pitch count was very distracting, like watching tennis. The no shift, visit limit, etc., that's all good, but the pitch count should be increased a little. And there's one time for a regular pitch, another after a foul ball. It's a little weird.
The pitch count should be increased, or the pitch clock?
Pitch clock.
Cardinals fans can't stand it because it doesn't give them time to talk about their brilliance between pitches, right? We're the only ones that understand what that pitcher was doing by stepping off the mound and looking over to first.
I'm trying to think. When I've been at an Indians game, I guess I have caught myself kind of looking at the clock a little bit.
I've looked at it here and there, but it's never thrown me off.
Did you guys ever, when I was a kid, I would...
Now we need a shot clock in high school.
I would love as a kid when I'd go to Indians games to sit behind the scouts that had the radar gun. Of course, now they have it up there on the scoreboard, but that was always, somebody hit it at 98, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was
I
always
totally
looking for
see you
the gun.
just 97. And the guy's like, no, 94. You're trying to call it out. I can see you doing that.
Speaking of nines, 9.9 million. That was the television viewers for LSU and Iowa, the women's national title game on Sunday. I mentioned this earlier, but I think it's worth saying again. That number, the previous high for a women's national title game was 5.68 million. So, I mean, not double, but I mean, somewhat close to that. That number exceeded every NBA playoff game besides the NBA Finals and every Major League Baseball playoff game minus the World Series.
That's impressive.
Is that more impressive, or is it better than LSU, Alabama, better than Notre Dame, USC, better than Ohio State, Penn State, better than Alabama, A&M?
I think part of it is because you have a school that was a good program in women's basketball, but it's not. It's a little bit. It's not the usual cast of characters. It's not Connecticut, right? In women's basketball, it's not Connecticut and Notre Dame or whatever. And you had a breakthrough performance that people were talking about of like, have you seen what this girl's doing? And so people, turned it on to see that as well. And I also think that just women's basketball in general, as I mentioned earlier, I think part of it is because you have the rise of some schools whose men's programs have very deep-rooted fan bases like Indiana, like North Carolina, that have become really good women's programs, and so that has brought even more eyeballs to the women's game. And women's basketball is really enjoyable. I enjoy it because it is obviously more below the rim. They run great half-court sets, and when you have somebody like Caitlin Clark, and then in general, with LSU, when you have somebody coming off the bench that hits 4 or 5 threes and gets 20 points to lift their team, people like those storylines.
I think what really hurts a WNBA game is the season is played during summer months.
Yeah.
I just don't think anybody wants to really go indoors, especially speaking from a Midwest standpoint. You want to be outdoors and enjoying that, and it's difficult to do that. Obviously going to a WNBA game. Again, no Caitlin Clark in the WNBA draft. 22, I believe, is the age limit, so she will return to Iowa. Angel Reese, LSU's best player, who got into it with Caitlin Clark, she'll return to LSU. Paige Beckers from UConn, who tore ACL, she'll be back. Is Mackenzie Holmes back at IU, right? Grace Berger's gone, right? But Mackenzie Holmes is back?
I think that's right, yes. Mackenzie, which one is the one from Maine?
Mackenzie Holmes.
I thought she was a senior. Is she a junior?
With the extra COVID year, I feel like.
Yeah, you may be right, yeah.
I could still return on that end. Thank you to Nestor. Thank you to Will Haskett. Jake, your Masters picks. Again, you had Sam Burns, is that correct?
Yeah, Cameron
of LSU.
Cameron Young, right?
Mm-hmm. And you went with Hideki?
Yep.
You've got the Land of the Rising Sun, putting on another green jacket, potentially? Weather looks a little dicey at Augusta National coming up this weekend. Mark, you got an early favorite?
Give me Rory. I'll go with Rory. I know he's one of the favorites, but
you and Will Haskett.
Yeah. Give me him and Colin Morikawa.
Jim Nantz would love that. Would love Rory. And I think for the game of golf, certainly was close to getting it done in the British Open, the last major, but Cameron Smith took that from him on the back nine. We'll see if Rory can complete the Grand Slam at Augusta National this week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Again, should be a nice day temperature-wise before some storms into the area tonight, so be safe out there.